Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
Do you have drums or something? There we go. This is a special news brief. All right, we done. My board is down, and I don't have the exactly. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is our live coverage of the Super Tuesday 2020. It is 7:37 p.m. on the East Coast. There is already two projected winners, or two races that have been called. Virginia with 99 delegates. Oh, we should, can we cut to our board? Let me just show you what we have here. We have the latest in whiteboard technology. What we will be doing is we will be posting things on the board as soon as Steve Kornacki posts them on his board. And that way you don't have to, you can basically watch Steve Kornacki without actually having to watch MSNBC. And that is our board there. We will get to the results on that in a moment, but let me first introduce our guests as well that we have in studio with us. From the New Republic, Alex Pareene is here.
Hi.
Some sound effect I can't muster because I don't, there we go. And Brandon Sutton is here from the discourse.
Yes, I am here. You can use a strained grunt for my sound effect.
And wait a second, Alex, you also have a podcast.
Yes, I do. It's called The Politics of Everything. You can find it at newrepublic.com or wherever you find podcasts. And we finally just got a sponsor, actually, so it's going to be going up a lot more regularly starting pretty soon.
Really?
Yeah.
We got to get on that.
Same, actually.
Yeah, we all got to get sponsors. Got to get the sponsor for that AM Quickie thing. Anyways, folks, let me take you over to the AM Quickie board. This is our board. As you can see, we have all of the names of the states that are that there are primaries tonight. And what we will do is we will put Bernie Sanders' vote tally in blue, as you can see at the top. We will put Joe Biden's in green. We will put Warren's in red. We'll put Bloomberg's in black with a red circle around it. We're taking a flyer here and saying Tulsi Gabbard is not going to get enough to warrant us going and finding a different color for dry erase board. Apparently, it's very limited in terms of what colors you can have. And we have already two races that have been called by our super department.
Three. North Carolina.
Three. Okay. So let's turn up here.
Coming from South Carolina, and also the number of endorsements he's gotten over the past few days has given them the confidence to vote for him today, thinking that he is perhaps the best person to beat Donald Trump in November. And this precinct, it had great turnout, Brian. They say that it's up to 50%, which is really high for a Democratic primary. So they're also Democrats are pointing to voter enthusiasm as well. We're just seeing the last voters exit now because things are going to close down real soon.
Delegates don't.
Leanne Caldwell, thank you.
Yeah, just put a check mark at this point. So, all right, yeah, we're still working out the technical aspects of our board, but turn them down for a moment. And what we have is now Joe Biden is the projected winner in Virginia, and now in North Carolina. He has 54% of the vote in Virginia. Sanders has 24%, Bloomberg 10%. This is according to our crack research team.
Our data team.
Exactly, our data team, 22% in. And so North Carolina is, that's a big issue. And we'll talk to Bobby Big Wheel soon, right? We're going to call him? Yeah. He did some work on North Carolina and in Texas. And those North Carolina, I suspect, at least according to Bobby Big Wheel, was sort of a bit of a bellwether. Virginia, people assumed it was going to go to Biden, right, guys? And it was seems to be growing. And Vermont, obviously, to Sanders, there wasn't much competition for him there. I mean, I think like at one point, I think Klobuchar and Buttigieg were going to try and go there, but and maybe steal a delegate or something. So this is, I don't, give me your first reactions, Alex. I mean, I think we might be in for, at the very least tonight, a little bit of a depressing night because certainly California and Texas are going to be late.
Yeah.
Late.
And if you're on the East Coast and you like Bernie, you're hopefully going to go to bed. You should go to bed tonight. But you will probably go to bed with a lot of bad news. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not shocked by how the early states have gone so far, but like you said, North Carolina was going to be a big test of what was going to be going on, I think.
Yep. Michael Bloomberg has now been projected the winner of American Samoa.
We got it.
Oh my God!
You left off American Samoa.
Sorry, folks.
I can't look. He beat Tulsi 175 to 103. I think that's the total vote count with 99% counted. Wow.
He did a girl dirty.
It's an interesting delegate play by Tulsi.
Holy cow! There's 16 delegates, and there's literally is it like 500 votes? Is that right?
I guess. I don't know.
It seems not appropriate. But Brandon, what is your sense? I mean, one of the things that Biden is winning overwhelmingly, it appears, old people and African American.
And also
voters.
the intersection of old and black.
Old and black.
Well, I mean, I think that's to be expected. Even in the beginning of the race, the first thing I heard when I was talking to, people at the gym, my family in South Carolina and North Carolina, was that Biden, but Obama handpicked him to be, the president if the worst was to happen to Obama. And so I think that, he's clout sharking Obama, to use the parlance of the times. Like, that's what it is. It's like, they're not voting for Biden because they like Biden. They're voting for Biden because they like Obama. And, this is their opportunity to vote for another Obama. However, I'm not too beat up about that because the second name on their list was always Bernie Sanders. It was like, I like Biden because of Obama, but Bernie's making a lot of sense to me. And so I feel as though, like, if Bernie wins, when Bernie wins, there's not too much of a bridge there. There's not too much of a gap there to bridge between like getting the black vote that still turn out, the older black vote still turn out for him. Because a lot of these older black people are still, they're culturally Democrats. They've been voting Democrats down the line for a very long time. And so like this is a population that is very, 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 they see Obama as the apotheosis of the civil rights movement that they kind of have. To be honest, many of them half remember because not everyone was marching back then. And so it was always going to be a hard sell to get that older black vote.
Well, I guess my concern is less in the general because I would imagine that, and again, I've sort of been harping on this without data, and it really is, I want to make it clear that I'm just speculating, but I would imagine that older black voters are some of the most anybody, blue, no matter who, or whatever the saying is. And that Sanders gets younger black voters who are lower propensity voters. And so that's the person you want in the general election because you can, on some level, take for granted certain cohorts of people who are going to vote for the Democrat unless it's like, I don't know, maybe Michael Bloomberg, frankly. Yeah. But broadly speaking, I don't think Sanders is so offensive to older African Americans that they're not going to vote. But I guess what I'm saying is, what about the primary?
Well, in my opinion, there's only, like you said, certain populations you can take for granted as going to be blue no matter who. Like there's just certain propensity of voters who are always going to vote along the Democratic line, maybe within a few percentage points of actually getting them to turn out. When it comes to the primary, I think what appeals to me most about Bernie Sanders is that he knows he was fighting an uphill battle with the older black vote when it came to Obama and when it came to Biden. Because let's be honest, a lot of these older black voters, they assume that Obama has endorsed Biden. Like they've been working from the assumption that Obama has endorsed Biden. because one would assume that, right?
Well, he endorsed him in the sense that he said he's my vice president. He hasn't come out and given like a report on his mental health today, but
right,
exactly. Well, let's be honest. Biden was a diversity hire for the Obama administration to appeal to older white voters, not to appeal to older black voters. And so, in many ways, Biden is using Obama for the obverse side of that. And so, in my opinion, Bernie has not taken the older black vote for granted. He's done his outreach. He's tried to appeal to them, and that's all you really can do. You can keep trying to appeal to them. Where I would say there could be a little bit more aggressiveness on his part would be really hammering home Biden's history on Social Security cuts. It's like stuff like that is going to be very important to the black community. It's going to be very important to the old community, and I don't think they're doing enough to hammer the point home that Biden, he's willing to put your Social Security on the table. Like, he's willing to put it on the table with Republicans. He's done it in the past. He will do it again because that's just his.
Warren actually came out with a video today, I think along those lines.
On the Social Security?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I don't know why that hasn't been a greater theme of the Sanders campaign. I suspect that we may see more of that in the next debate, particularly, following how things go. But it's quite possible that we could, North Carolina is an ominous sign.
Yeah.
That the fact that they were able to call it so quickly
Yeah.
is really the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, this is not calling something 30 seconds after the
Polls close.
The polls close indicates that they have some pretty dramatic exit polls. And that does not bode well for tonight, frankly. North Carolina is a big state. I mean, there's 110 votes. They're the third largest, right? After California, Texas, and then North Carolina, and then Virginia. And he's already won Virginia and North Carolina. Now, we don't know what the delegate split is going to be, but right here, right now, we're seeing
from Republicans in 2018,
32% in, 55 to 23%.
Well, in 2020 to be the next president of the United States. And if that vote is starting to coalesce and pick somebody, that suburban college-educated vote that hasn't really gone to either Sanders or Biden at this point,
the suburban college-educated vote.
Huge development. And I think a decent part of it is when you're running fourth and fifth in Iowa and New Hampshire, the electability argument is out the window. You look like a giant killer in South Carolina, you project that electability strength, and then all of a sudden, it's not just the momentum, it's not just the endorsements, but people think you can be a winner. And I wonder how much that's playing into people's minds right now, going into those suburban districts and making that
find
choice.
this guy Gibbs, let's bring it down, grotesque as a human being. I mean, I think sort of the Anwar al-Awlaki son comment was one that sort of cemented it for me. But I think his assessment is correct.
That's totally correct, yeah. And I mean, that was no one makes a positive case politically for why Joe Biden should be president. No one makes it. No one. It's just his supporters don't. His surrogates don't. No one has any case for him that is based on what he will accomplish. It's based on the one hand,
he can win.
His personal decency, but more important, and the entire point of coming together around him was to signal to voters that only that and only that he can win.
He cannot win.
Well, I mean, I think it's a terrible miscalculation. I think it's a terrible miscalculation.
I don't want to say he can't win because I want to maintain some shred of hope, but I think that this, the odds of him losing relative to really, I think Bloomberg. If I had to handicap them, I would say Bloomberg has the least chance of winning.
Yeah.
But then I would put Biden second, and I don't think it's. I think part of it is his politics make it close. Insofar as that, I'm afraid that he's not going to motivate people to get out there and actually work on his behalf. I think negative partisanship is going to help.
Yeah.
People want to get rid of Trump. But I'm also just concerned that they've already started to subpoena people in terms of Burisma, et cetera, et cetera. It's maybe unfair.
But that's the reality.
But it's the reality, right? It's like you can't go and say, well, this guy should be, the starting forward for the Celtics. And if he was just not 5'3", he would be. And that's just not fair because he has all the skills and whatnot. Sorry. The basketball is a certain height, and you need to have a certain amount of height to score.
But you see that. You see the decision to sort of try to, force Biden over the goalpost there. And you remember 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and, she handled the Benghazi thing, I think, very well. And the email stuff. And the email stuff, I don't know how much that actually hurt her. So many things could have been negative. It had a negative impact on why she lost. But that being said, it's hard to understand how they decided to pick somebody who was basically Hillary Clinton, but worse. But like they found Joe Biden, like somebody who has just as much scandal associated with them. They don't even have the break the glass ceiling argument associated with it. But
I think that cuts both ways because there's also, I think misogyny is, I don't know what it is, if it's worth 2 or 3 percentage points. Particularly in those states that Clinton lost, I think misogyny is a factor. It's not there with Biden because I think, he's probably, if you're a misogynist, you're like, I can work with this guy.
If that's your number one issue, you already have a candidate. But if that's just like second or third in your ranking.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just going to say, and also just like what very few things have made me feel as crazy during this electoral cycle as like listening to Biden speak or try to communicate his ideas and just failing and no one seeming to be bothered or talking about that. And, I remember during the 2016 general election, and we had slews and slews of, ostensibly professional media, mental health professionals coming out and saying, well, you know what, Trump, he has the classic signs of dementia, the classic signs of just simply not being, having all his mental faculties there. And Biden might be the only candidate who is less lucid than Trump is.
Yeah, where are those people now?
Well, because mental health, like psychological health, amongst other things, is definitely part of the capitalist neoliberal paradigm. It's like that influences a lot of how people interpret what counts as mental illness, and a lot of those those mental health professionals. They're probably the PMC class. They're they're your nurse practitioners who focus on X, Y, and Z. And like their political alignment was showing, I think Trump definitely has dementia, but like you can't say Trump has signs of dementia and then look at Biden be unable to remember what day Super Tuesday is, and then go, oh no, but he's fine, like he's totally fine. So my fear is that I think this is Biden's endgame. Super Tuesday is Biden's like his best argument for how he's electable. But once you get him in front of a crowd, once you get him in another debate, and it's just him and just Warren and just Sanders, and I guess Bloomberg will still be there,
and maybe Tulsi. Michael Tracy is insisting that she's back on the debate stage because she won a couple of delegates.
Oh. We could use an Assadist in the race.
Yes, I mean she'll be providing
representation matters.
How much you want to bet she's going to provide a little bit of cover for Biden?
I don't know. Tulsi, she's a wild card. She's I don't like her, but admittedly, she's the most likely candidate to be like, you know what? Like Biden, do you remember my name? Like, can you draw a clock?
Right.
Okay. Can you what's going on? I remember when Castro tried to do it, and they the media was like, whoa, that's off limits. You can't remind everyone that Joe Biden is not.
I mean, one of the things I think, regardless of what happens with the race going forward, that people are going to look back on is that it's quite clear that Elizabeth Warren should have gone at Biden.
Yeah.
Very early in the first or second debate about the bankruptcy bill.
Yeah.
And this, it's interesting what we heard from the WFP today.
Yeah.
Which was essentially everyone's like, Warren is saying like, look, I'm on Team Progressive.
I'm not a wrecker, basically.
I'm not a wrecker. And
say it all you want.
Well, I don't think she is, but I do think that it is indicative of a failed campaign that she has to say that at this point.
Yes, I think so.
Right? I mean, that there's a failure of their campaign where you are now essentially a year into the campaign and no one knows where you are, so much so that you literally have to put out a press release like, this is where I am. That seems to me to be problematic.
Maybe I'm a mark. I'm definitely a mark, but I don't think she's actively a wrecker, which is almost worse, though.
No, I don't think she's actively a wrecker either.
I mean, the outcome is what matters.
Yeah,
though.
definitely. But I mean, for me, it's worse that she's not actively a wrecker because, I mean, if she was actively a wrecker, there are better choices you can make to actively wreck Xander. So like that, like, but if you're if your campaign has been run so incompetently that people are like, oh, even people who were more inclined to believe that you were actually earnest are like, now, like, what's going on here? And you're forced to, adjust your fact sheet to say that, look, guys, I'm not a record. That's worse though. Like that's like, I mean, it speaks worse to your like intellectual character to be like, oh no, like I ran a campaign so incompetent people think it's a joke.
It's like, I'm not throwing games. I just suck.
I'm just like,
I like her political instincts. Like, no, I'm not trying to hand the nomination to Biden. I'm just trying to get named the winner somehow at a contested convention after winning no states.
No, go ahead, please.
My impression with I do think you're right that she should have gone on after the bankruptcy thing, because it's like that's her issue. Like it literally is her issue. But I think it was a version of, how you would watch a debate and you'd see all the candidates like say, basically spend their entire time focusing with like a laser on Sanders' record, trashing his agenda. And then after the debate, you'd hear the pundits say, why will no one train their fire on Bernie Sanders? And the answer was that if they were kind of not hitting him as hard as they could, it's because he's a very popular figure within the party.
Biden.
No, I mean, Sanders and Biden.
Right.
They're the two most popular among normal Democrats. They're the two most popular people on those debate stages.
But it seems to me that Harris actually scored a couple of points when she went after Biden. But the problem was...
Then she panicked.
Well, but the problem was she panicked because she had no... like second chapter.
She didn't,
like she attacked him on something, but then found out like the next day said like, well, but actually I agree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
And that was problematic. The difference with Warren is she could attack Biden on day one about the bankruptcy bill. And then on day two, go deeper. And then on day three, start to pull his guts out. Like, literally. But I need to take one break here and turn to the camera and say, Saul, it is time for you to go to bed. Now, because of the primaries, I have not been at home as much as I want to put Saul to bed, but now it is time for you to go to bed, buddy. And let me just say this. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, would want you to go to bed. So there you go. Time to go to bed. Fist bump. Go right... Come up to the TV, come up to the computer. All right, buddy, go to sleep now. All right, I love you.
Aw,
sorry.
Quality
Continue.
remote parenting.
Yes, there you go. Exactly. There you go. But yes, I think that's it'll be interesting to see. Massachusetts looms very, very large.
Yeah, definitely.
Because obviously, as you can see on our big board. Massachusetts down here, 91 votes. And incidentally, this is, I don't know if you noticed this, Brenda, but this is laid out in order temporally of when we're going to get results.
I did notice.
You did. Brenda did notice that. So Massachusetts, 91 delegates. The delegates are less relevant than what it signals to Warren in terms of whether she should get out.
Yeah.
I'm convinced if she loses Massachusetts, she has to step out. I mean, I just don't know how she stays in. I think I could, I go back and forth as to whether, how rational a decision it was to stay in the race. Here, I think there's still sort of like some whiff of like, hey, if there's a brokered convention, we should stay in this because, but they suspend their campaign.
Right.
On some level, like if I was, advising Warren, I would say, look, the polling out of Massachusetts is not great. Maybe their internal polls says something different. So who knows? But I would say, like, let's not run in Massachusetts. Let's step out, suspend the campaign. You have just as much chance to be like the compromise candidate if you've won 6% of the delegates as if you have won 14% of the delegates, right? Like, I mean, it's still like the whole point is like, we shouldn't let the first two guys win.
Yeah.
You have a better chance, honestly.
Massachusetts, too early to call.
Too early to call. And in the great state of Maine, all the way up north, too early to call. Quick reminder how they stack up so far tonight.
All right, well, there it is.
I think there's a chance that Warren thinks she's still going to pitch herself as the compromise or the unity candidate if we have a contested convention. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to work because there's going to be a Biden camp and a Sanders camp, and nominating Elizabeth Warren isn't going to make either of those camps happy.
I mean, I think I disagree with that. I guess my point is to the extent that, well, no, let me put it this way. Yes, you're going to upset both camps, maybe in some respects. But I guess my point is I don't know if that's a viable strategy, but it's just as viable with, like, I don't know, a half a dozen delegates as it is like a dozen delegates is my point. Because you're not going in second or first.
Right.
You're going in at third. Now, maybe they're thinking we got to be third instead of fourth.
Yeah.
Because of Bloomberg, and maybe that's part of the thinking, which is also, that's not irrational in my mind.
But also you become less palatable. If you're putting out press releases that you're not a wrecker, you become less and less palatable the longer you stay in the race, and the more that narrative takes hold. It's like, I think that, it's hard to understand the thought process behind a lot of decisions that Warren is making, because some of them, might lead one to believe she's actively malicious. Some might lead one to believe that she is incompetent. I tend towards the latter, because I tend towards the Clinton staffers are just doing their best to sink her campaign. But, where we are now, I think staying in the race, the longer she stays in, the more difficult it becomes to make the argument that she can unite the party. Because like Jamie said, you're going to have the Bernie camp who's going to become more and more disenchanted with her when a lot started off in a good place with her. And the Biden camp are just, for some reason, married to Joe Biden.
The establishment is getting behind him, so it's not just going to be people who love Biden. It's going to be the entire political establishment thinking this is our best shot to keep our jobs.
I mean, I think, I think Warren sort of satisfies. I mean, I do think she is a good compromise candidate, but I also do think that if she comes in fourth, it's a harder argument to make that she's the proper compromise candidate than if she comes in third.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Well, she has to actually, to put together an argument that you can put together a coalition and win, you've got to do that somewhere.
Well, I mean, I think the idea, that's on some level, the best advice is get out.
Yeah,
so you have
exactly.
a reason to argue as to why you didn't get delegates.
Because you're not showing, exactly.
Because you're not showing up. But the problem is Bloomberg's in there, and he's going to pick up, you don't want to leave American Samoa
Steve
wide
drawn
open.
on the United States.
And and also you don't want to come in fourth place to someone who's already dropped out. You don't want to come in fourth place to Buttigieg.
Exactly.
You don't want to come in fourth in delegates to someone who's no longer in the race.
Exactly.
Because that makes you look makes you look like a loser.
And I guess from the perspective of people on the left of the party, it's a very difficult sort of question. Do you want Warren to drop out after Super Tuesday? I mean, and part of it is a function of how well she does. Right. I mean, if she loses Massachusetts, I think she has to drop out. And it sort of appears that she's going to. But for the sake of argument, if she wins Massachusetts, the question is, do you want her to drop out now to, throw Bernie that extra 10%? Who knows what it is? But I don't think it's not a huge.
It's not a huge number. It really isn't.
It's not a huge number. Or do you want her to stay in so that come the convention, she can throw her delegates to Bernie, or can have some influence, or could be the third choice? I mean, who knows? I mean, I think it's a very sort of it's a tough call. But I think it gets a lot easier if she doesn't win in Massachusetts. I
don't think she's going to win Massachusetts. I think it might be a blowout.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah, those are Massachusetts women.
You see, Warren is in the exit poll leading that slightly. It's just
slightly beating Biden
and I apologize, this graphic is confusing, but Warren, okay, it's been fixed now. Warren running back at 19%. What you're seeing, again, Biden 30 and 28 between those two groups. So Sanders benefiting more from male support. Warren benefiting more from female support. Biden kind of threading the needle there, doing well with both groups. And I think if you do the math, at least you see in the exit poll, maybe Biden and Sanders a little bit up on Warren there, but we will see as the results come in.
All right. Should we call Aaron Kleinman right now? Okay, I'm going to give him a call. I will just say that in terms of Massachusetts, I'm getting texts from John Benjamin. It's mostly swears, but he is reminding us, like, when we went around, we knocked on about 60 doors. I don't know, maybe a third, a little bit more, between a third and a half were home. And it was the only names we heard were Biden and Sanders.
Yeah.
And it was about 60-40, working class neighborhood, incredibly diverse. Judging by last names, the Latino folk that we spoke to, all Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke to African immigrants who I suspect were Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't say, but they were very, and it was interesting the way that it broke down. White people split.
Yeah.
But it was about 60-40 Bernie, and I would be surprised if that's not the case. Biden is the projected winner of Alabama now.
Is that the surge of young voters has not happened so far. The night is early.
All right, we'll turn up my phone.
The turnout seems to be
We're
Biden in the states that we've seen than we've seen of Sanders.
Aaron, it's Sam Cedar. You're live with me here. Alex Pareene, Brandon Sutton, Jamie, Matt, and, well, Brendan's at the sophisticated board that we have. You and I spoke earlier today. You had said basically that the two places that you thought were really interesting and relevant, North Carolina and Texas. Let's talk about North Carolina. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. And yeah, North Carolina is really, a huge disappointment for Bernie right now because, obviously, I don't know how much you guys know about geography, but it is right to the north.
Wait, I can tell you it's north of South Carolina.
Right. And so he didn't win a single county there, on Saturday. And so I was looking to North Carolina to see, well, that was kind of a weird thing where you had like everyone dropping out and Clyburn coming in to save the day for him. And also North Carolina has, especially like in the western part of the state, these areas that, where Bernie did really well. You have a lot of like liberal college towns. The African-American population there isn't as significant a portion of the Democratic primary as it is in South Carolina. You have a spattering of Latino voters as well, and Bernie did well among them in Nevada. And so, you're kind of hoping like, hey, you can kind of put to rest this notion that, Biden or whoever will, or that Bernie can't win in the South. And, maybe in North Carolina, you can kind of make that showing. And, we haven't really gotten localized results yet. And it'll be interesting to see if, Bernie can show that he can win some areas where, you'd want him to do well. But right now it looks like he really does have this Southern problem. And it's the same one that he had really against Clinton, where she really was able to win because she did so well in Southern state primaries. So
actually,
it is a little disheartening
we
to see all that.
We just saw a graphic that MSNBC, which is basically our our tech, our analyst team that we use, they just showed a graphic. Black vote in the South, black vote in other states. Black vote in other states, more or less parity. Close.
Yeah.
Black vote in the South dramatically in favor of Joe Biden. North Carolina is this bellwether. So if North Carolina is telling this, Alabama, we see the same thing. That's not terribly surprising, although, North Carolina, I guess, is more problematic. Here's an Alabama exit poll. Biden wins the support of 72% of African Americans. North Carolina, the idea is that there's maybe more of a diverse coalition, I guess, on some level that you could put together if you're Bernie. What else does this tell us?
It's also like and North Carolina also has a younger African-American population than some of the other Deep South states. And so that should help. That should help Bernie, because he still does well. I mean, I think even controlling for a region, he still does well among, under 34 African American voters, regardless of where they live. So you'd hope that North Carolina, which has, because it has these, growing in a way that Alabama doesn't, these kind of growing metropolises that, attract, younger people in general, that, hey, maybe, you can kind of stanch the bleeding. They have kind of a younger electorate there than they do in South Carolina. They're more diverse, more educated, there are a lot more white liberals there. And just, he hasn't been able to crack it yet. And it's really frustrating because, I know the campaign did a lot of work trying to, have outreach among them. Like Bernie, or, a few weeks ago, we thought he was going to win North Carolina. And so, Biden, as we all know, really didn't have much of a campaign in any of these Super Tuesday states. And I think it really also shows you how connected to Obama that he is.
I mean, is this Obama or is this James Clyburn? I mean, honestly, it's
Obama. If you look at focus groups, they still think of, a lot of African American voters, especially older ones, really think of Biden as really connected to Obama. And so, yeah, I think Clyburn actually, Clyburn is a nice validator, but it's he's also, not everyone in South Carolina knows who he is in a way that everyone in South Carolina knows who Obama is. And so, I think part of the challenge for Bernie going forward, I think, is, you have to kind of walk this tightrope of saying, because what he wants to do is he has to kind of concede a little bit that Obama did good things, but that we need to do more. And I think Biden's just going to be, he's kind of running on a restoration, and Bernie kind of has to, we want a revolution, but you have to do that without really trashing what Obama did. And, Obama did some things that, might have materially harmed a lot of people in these places, but, he still has especially among Democrats everywhere, he has a really high approval rating. So, how do you walk that tightrope? I think that's a challenge that they'll face coming out of Super Tuesday, going into, other states, even though, not all of them are going to look like the Deep South in terms of just how popular Biden will be.
I guess part of it should be, there should have been more emphasis up to this point of why hasn't Obama endorsed Joe Biden?
Yeah.
Like the absence of an endorsement should have been highlighted on some level. Like, what is Obama trying to tell us?
Yeah.
But I don't know how much that would have made a dent, at least.
I wonder about that too, because it is kind of, at some point it becomes, how much does he really kind of want to? Again, it's like, does Obama? Do you want to be seen as egging him on?
Right?
Do you want to
drive
just kind
him
of?
Into the
what
race?
That does is it kind of just forces
his hand.
Forces Biden to just run more with Obama.
All right, so let's look at this scenario, because one of the things I know that you've also you're sort of keyed into is Texas. Let's assume, as I look at the map here, or at our big whiteboard. I don't know if you can see this, if you're tuned into our coverage, but we have a fairly sophisticated whiteboard here. Virginia is for Biden. That is really about, in my estimation, a lot of defense contractors super psyched to get Biden back in. North Carolina is for Biden. That is about that African-American vote that we just spoke about. Alabama, African-American vote. When we look at California, when we look at Texas, when we look at, Colorado, let's hold Massachusetts for a moment. When we look at those three states, Colorado's not necessarily the biggest out there, but there's we're talking a significant Latino population. That is, what are the implications if Bernie was to win big in California and big in Texas? Right now, the polls, I think we talked about earlier, were they've gone back and forth. 6 months ago, it looked like Joe Biden was going to win Texas by 20 points. 3 weeks ago, it looked like Bernie was going to win by 8 or something. And now it looks like who knows. What does it mean if Bernie wins by Texas by, let's say, 10?
Yeah, I mean, well, if Bernie wins Texas by 10, I mean, that's going to be huge for his, raw number of delegates. And I think a big part of, I think people want to back a winner. And I think, we saw this really in the Republican side in 2016 as well, is people really don't want to have a contested convention. And you kind of saw, and I think that might have actually really hurt Warren coming into this too, because her campaign said they're going with the contested convention strategy. People really don't like that. Right. People like direct democracy more. And so, and then in 2016, when Republicans were saying, when Cruz was saying, oh, we'll fight him at the convention, you really saw voters close ranks behind Trump. And so, I mean, I think what Bernie really needs coming out tonight is delegates. Even if he loses a bunch of these states, he still had a small relative to these states coming in lead over Biden coming into tonight. And if he can kind of come out of the night with more delegates than Biden, he can say, I'm the safe path. I'm the path that avoids, a knockdown, drag out fight in Milwaukee. And so I think, just having more and, he can be like, listen, I'll concede that Biden won a few places, but I won more. And, people generally like to be with a winner. People, momentum is a thing. I mean, you kind of saw that really. I mean, this is a very stark depiction of how that's the case. People, really, I mean, Biden's overperforming all his polls because he has the perception of momentum and the perception of being a winner. And so Bernie needs some wins to basically say, I'm the real winner here. Biden, he might have caught up with me based on some luck, but we're the real winners here. We're the ones winning these big states, and we're going to win the nomination.
What should we be looking at in terms of Texas? And what's a disaster in North Carolina, I guess? I mean, the numbers are still coming in. But what is this is kind of, the disaster in North Carolina, I would say, so in North Carolina, and so, again, I'm going to go back to my North Carolina screen to see if they have any local results in, but, where Bernie really won last time was in the western part of the state, where it's kind of, ancestral Democrats is how they put it, people who, might have, like the people who for some reason vote for Heath Shuler also tend to be, the Republican Party's kind of taken over local politics there so much more to a degree that like all the moderates became Republicans, and now the Democrats there tend to be pretty liberal. And so that's like the western part of the state. And then also you have Buncombe and Ashe counties, which is the home of Asheville and Boone. And so those are really liberal kind of mountain towns. They're almost like ski towns in Colorado. And so you have like a lot of kind of liberal politics do well there. And so Bernie won those, it seems like. And, you hope that he makes inroads into like some of the bigger urban counties, like Wake County, where Raleigh is a pretty diverse county. It's a younger county. You have a lot of college graduates. You have a significant, all sorts of minority populations. It'd be nice to see if he does well in Wake County. Same with Guilford and Forsyth counties in the Piedmont Triangle. Mecklenburg County is the home to Charlotte, but like that's Charlotte, is kind of like, it's like Atlanta, but without all the stuff. It's like a kind of, it's like this dull baking town.
I can confirm that.
Fair enough.
Sorry if there's anyone listening from Charlotte.
I was going to say, we just lost a lot.
I went to a nice craft brewery there.
Charlotte.
It's a more staid town. It's a very finance-heavy town. I think Bernie just doesn't do well in, places that are really dependent on finance for jobs. Right. Even as they are, in general, there are too many finance jobs in this country, but unfortunately there are some there and some are located in Charlotte. And so, you'd hope that in those big urban areas that Bernie has some type of bounce back. Also in some of like the college counties, like, I think he won Orange County, home to Chapel Hill last time, Durham County, Pitt County, home to East Carolina. Those, if he can kind of bounce back a little bit in those college areas, it shows that, I think the best case scenario is that where Biden really racked up the big wins are among rural African Americans, because just so many fewer states have a rural African American population. So it would show that maybe his problems in North Carolina won't map to other states as much, where the African American population tends to be more urban.
So, all right. So, fair enough. In terms of Texas, what should we be looking at in terms of Texas?
All right. So, I'll start at the bottom of the campaign of the state and work my way up. And so you have the Rio Grande at the bottom of the state, border with Mexico, and the counties along the border there. Somewhat rural, though. You have a bunch of like urban development there and a border economy of its own, heavily Latino. And so, what would really be a disaster for Bernie is that if he doesn't win like those Rio Grande border counties, because Nevada the caucus there was really powered by a strength among Latino voters. And so if he can't keep that up in Texas, it's like a big warning sign for him.
So the border counties are the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, they're not like a ton of votes there, but it'll really be a good measure of like his strength of Latino voters overall. And same with Bayard County, which is the home of San Antonio. He'll want to do really well there, because if he's not doing well there, it is another like, oh man, something's going wrong among like, we put in all this work among Latino organizing, and then if they're going to Biden, they have to figure out how to right the ship.
Let me ask you like sort of a completely unrelated, well, not completely unrelated question, but you say San Antonio. San Antonio declared a medical state of emergency, I think yesterday or today. It was just designed to basically keep people out of the city, apparently, who had been diagnosed with coronavirus. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how people receive that. I suspect, I think this country has been under a medical state of emergency, I think, since the beginning of February. And people don't seem to know that, but I don't know how it gets reported.
I would say this country's had a medical state of emergency for decades because we don't have universal health coverage.
I appreciate that, but I'm talking specifically in terms of the coronavirus. I mean, do you think that's going to impact, the vote at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and it'll be, that's a really good point. And I think looking at out there compared to turnout changes in the rest of the state, that could end up depressing turnout as people are afraid to kind of, leave the house. But, I think the coronavirus, we're still processing coronavirus. Like, we still have no idea what the impact's going to look like. But I think in a pandemic, I think there's room for Bernie to really make a case for himself, because, I think one of the best moments of his campaign was, at his comeback when he told that huge crowd, look at, I just want you to commit to helping the person next to you. And in a pandemic, we're learning that we're only as strong as the weakest person.
Right.
And I mean, that cuts to the core of Bernie's message. And I think now is the time for him to say, the campaigns are always kind of wary of, at least on the Democratic side, they can be wary of be seen as politicizing an issue. But, this is really, a very kind of scary and dangerous moment. And I think it's, Bernie can make the case that, we are only as strong, we're only as strong as the weakest person. This campaign for everyone, we want to lift everyone up. And, you don't have to live in fear if we go on my path. And so, the immediate fear, I think maybe that worked against him. It might have worked against him. Who knows? I mean, it's really hard to speculate, but I think a pandemic also is, you're seeing now just like the need for someone like him.
All right, Aaron, final question before we let you go. And I apologize for not, announcing, or introducing you properly up front as the director of research and GiveSmart, apparently, at Future Now. And, of course, Bobby Bigwheel on Twitter. Yeah. How much is, we spoke to Dave Weigel today. He said 1 million votes already were in Texas, early votes, which is like almost like 60 or 70% of what the total was in 2016. I'm watching the television now, and Alicia Menendez, who apparently is Senator Menendez's daughter.
Really?
Who's ever heard of that type of
so
nepotism?
She earned that job.
Who's ever heard of any type of nepotism like that? She is, I think, in Texas, and apparently there's long lines in Texas. So, I mean, give me a sense. And I'm seeing long lines in California, and we've already had a lot of early voting. Do you have any sense of, like, who does that favor? Or do we just don't know?
It is, I mean, I think it's a moment for all the take slingers out there to have a bit of humility. I mean, this has been a very topsy-turvy race. I mean, especially like with California, for example, which is the big delegate prize of the night. You know, I think it was assumed going into, for the past few months that the late votes in California always seem to favor Democrats. And in 2016, Hillary had a kind of commanding lead coming out of election night in California, but then Bernie ended up narrowing it to, a single-digit one. And so the thought was, well, Bernie's going to do really well in these late-breaking votes. But, as we saw, Biden's in the middle of some type of surge. And so maybe maybe the late-breaking votes break more toward him. And, also, a primary is different than a general because, I think in a general, you're 90% of the electorate's basically locked in months in advance. And so, you feel pretty good about turning in an early vote, and you're pretty sure that, your opinion won't change. A primary is really different. And I think in this primary, one thing that we've really seen across the primaries that have happened so far is Democrats are kind of like generally fine with most of their choices. And so, maybe a lot more people kind of sat on their ballots than otherwise might have voted if it were a starker choice. And we don't really know what, the late breakers seem to be going toward Biden, but historically they favored Bernie. So it's really just, I have no good answer. I don't want to go out on a limb here because we really don't know. It's kind of unprecedented. So it's just kind of wait and see.
Well, we're not going to do that around here. Aaron, I appreciate your...
I know, it's not a great answer for live radio.
No, I feel like everybody has prefaced everything they've said to me today with that particular, like, sort of caveat. Like, sorry, I'm ruining your programming. But no, I mean, this is... we're in some very weird... Look, It's a very weird era, and there's no reason why this shouldn't be super weird, too. And... I don't know. I just want to get through this whole thing without having a significant drinking problem. Aaron Kleinman, Director of Research and GiveSmart over at Future Now. You can follow him on Bobby Big Wheel. Oh God, I think I just threw up in my mouth. Michael Bloomberg is on the screen. But Aaron, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Okay.
Good luck tonight, guys.
Thanks.
We will. And gals.
We're gonna try and catch back up with Aaron. I was supposed to hear from. I was supposed to hear from my buddy, lawyer Matthew, who was doing election protection up in Maine. I don't know, lawyer Matthew, if you're listening to me, text me and tell me that you're going to call in to get a sense of what's happening in Maine. Here's Michael Bloomberg speaking. Do we dare?
Poll closing in Arkansas.
Oh, they're not even listening to him. That makes me feel better.
Where is he? I guess he's just at his...
So
Bloomberg headquarters.
Bloomberg
I guess.
headquarters.
Somewhere.
He's down. Is he downtown? He's just like.
Where is Spectre located? Like,
all right. Listen, people indulge me. So somebody just sent me this clip of a conversation between Rachel Maddow and Al Sharpton. They said it was bizarre, and they actually sent it to me and texted me. So I'm going to play it via my phone. Or should I try and text it to you?
You can put it in the Slack. It's a video.
Oh, I can put it in the Slack? All right, that's what I'll do. I mean, I haven't seen it, and this person's judgment. I guess we're going to find out if I can trust it. But he said that it was bizarre. It was almost like there it is. It's in Sound Polls now. Like she was trying to broker some deal between Bernie and Bloomberg. I don't know. But is Bloomberg talking? Here we go. Yeah.
Now, the night the polls are still open in a number of Super Tuesday states, and as the results come in, here's what is clear. No matter how many delegates we win tonight, we have done something no one else thought was possible. In just 3 months, we've gone from 1%
It
of
is
the polls
8:30 Eastern Time, and you'll note we're just bringing
Just
this
talking
in
over
from
him?
the side.
They don't even
We
care.
only have 1% in.
Well, they have 1% in, so in
There you go.
Arkansas, so
Too early to call. Arkansas, too early to call. That's literally 63 votes for Biden and 23 votes for Bloomberg.
That's all of Arkansas.
It's all the Democrats in Arkansas.
well, I appreciate the fact that they're talking over Michael Bloomberg. I think that you should get a medal for that.
That's the best way to listen to him. Just talk.
But I mean, is he really going to pretend like what we've been able to do just getting into the election 2 months ago and spending only $750 million? And I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah. No, I know.
This guy has spent
insane.
so much effing money. Like, maybe this is just probably not the time to go on this type of rant, but the amount of effing money that Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer have gone out into their backyard and lit on fire just to watch what color it is when it burns is stunning. They literally, with that amount of money, could have essentially eradicated homelessness in this country. I mean, just contemplate this for the moment. Like, if you don't think there's a problem with billionaires in this country, like that money, that money is not in their bank account, so much so that they can afford to spend it, it is flowing through the economy. And it is helping somebody else. And the idea that it's just sitting there and they can light this stuff on fire is just...
It's an indictment of our entire system of our entire.
I mean, I just did some quick math. So, like, you said $700 million he spent on his campaign so far.
Well, I think it's somewhere between 500 and 700, but it's sort of hard to calculate because he's spent the money in so many different ways. The official campaign, I think, has spent $500 million.
Yeah,
but then it's like my foundations have given money to every mayor in the country so that they'll support me. I mean,
look,
just proportionally, I just did the math. Just proportionally, if you make $70,000 a year and you would probably spend and you spend like $700 every month on weed, you have spent more money than Michael Bloomberg has spent proportionally on your drug habit than he has on running for president.
So this was just like a splurge month for him.
Whatever. He had some friends coming over.
As of a week ago, it was $500 million that he spent from his campaign, and I think it's. I mean, look, this is conjecture on my part, but I think it's fairly safe to say there's probably another $200-300 million that he has spent in pursuit of this nomination through other means because he has so many other outlets. I mean, never mind. Like, I mean, it's just. It's stunning.
Michael, I think he's the best argument that billionaires should not exist.
He's the best argument for a wealth tax by far.
But I mean, I think I've mentioned last time I was on the show that the Democratic Party kind of sowed a suit for a Sanders type figure to come in and say, hey, you know what? I have a platform in line with all of the ostensible values that the Democratic Party has told you that they stand for over the past, let's say, 50 decades. We're the party of people of color, of the working, et cetera, et cetera. But, I think they also sowed kind of like the negative suit, same for a Bloomberg type figure, where it's like, you know what? We're just waiting for a boss to come in. It's like we're waiting for someone to be elected who does not require your input any more further, a reasonable Republican, someone who can just come in and take. And he's even arguing that he doesn't even need their money. It's like I feel
like that's sort of less a Democratic thing than an American thing on some level. I mean, I think like Buttigieg at one point tried to sort of push this thing of like, look, how many of you want to turn on your TV and not
care about
politics? And that is like, at least, I mean, Alex, you're a little younger than I am, but through my life, that has been the dominant theme of Democrats and, broadly speaking, the left. It has been like, I want to go back to doing all the things that make me sort of the left, which is not about politics, but it's about like art and meeting new people and going to, I'm not like the riding these things. I'm just saying like that, like I remember it in 1992, I guess it was. I was in a comedy club. And when Bill Clinton won, everybody was like, "Oh my God, thank you!" And I was just like, "Really?" Like, I mean, like what? And it took me a long time to realize what people were so excited about was like they were like, don't have to worry about Reagan anymore.
Yeah.
And then it was the same thing after Bush on some level. That Obama was coming in there and going, basically saying the same thing, that not as in a ham-fisted way as Biden, but more poetically was saying, like, we're not divided. There is no red America. There is no blue America. It's like, don't worry, I got this.
Yeah.
Well, can you really blame them when people are not taught critical thinking skills in school and the media is just a steady diet of manufacturing consent for the worst garbage?
If I answered that, then Chapter 7 of my Blame the Voters chapter would be revealed, and I can't do a spoiler alert. But I mean, I don't know if I blame people for that. But I lament that is a dynamic.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that they don't have necessarily critical thinking skills. Like, broadly speaking, I think that a lot of people who engage in the political process have kind of given up on it having like a meaningful impact on their day-to-day lives. And so, like, I think there's a certain amount of person who are like, I'm going to go into the voting process, vote, because that's what we know, that's democracy. But then I'm going to have to figure out certain aspects of my life personally. And I mean, I think that's why a lot of people have tuned out of the system. I think that's why a lot of people have moved.
I don't think that's what it is. Because, I mean, like, I think the people that I'm talking about are people who, I think they're just like, they are not ideological. They just want government to work what they perceive to be like an efficient, fair way. And they want to elect people and check back in 4 years and be able to go on with their lives. And I don't think it's a question of apathy or feeling like none of it matters. I think they feel like it does matter, but I think they feel like this is, something that we can just choose somebody, outsource it, you handle it, I've delegated it to you, and make it work.
Well, they're clearly a little bit ideological if people are Democrats in the first place and they want Democrats to win, right?
Yeah. I'm saying they're completely divorced. I'm saying within the context of the Democratic Party. Like, I mean, sure. I think there are,
But then if winning becomes the only priority, that's also really bad, because as we've seen over the past few decades, the Democratic Party responds to losses by tacking to the right. They always say we're chasing after this mythical centrist, this mythical moderate voter. And, sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but they continue to move to the right. So Bloomberg is really just the apotheosis of that.
I agree.
I don't think that they're apathetic, generally speaking. I think more like they have a limited scope of what politics it can be for. And like they have a limited scope of like what their role in that system actually is. I think that you're right in the sense there is a large part of the population who views democracy as like, hey, you know what? Every and if I'm good, every 2 years I go into the voting booth, vote for somebody, and then I can tune out for another 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why a lot of people feel that way is because there's a disconnect between what they view as their everyday problems, like, hey, my rent is going up, or like I have to, or I worry a lot about getting whether I can afford this bill or that bill. And so like it's a condition, not necessarily apathy, but
well, that's learned helplessness or something.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
there's no sense of political economy and sort of like the political choices that go into our daily lives.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, I think that, that's part of the neoliberal project. Right? A big part of the neoliberal project has been separating out politics from policy, or rather politics from power. It's been separating out like, hey, here every 4 years we talk about all of our problems, and we get together, we talk about all our problems with, racism and sexism and misogyny and homophobia. And that's disconnected from the actual, act of solving those problems through policy. That's why I think Bernie has a harder sell than someone like Biden too, because he's asking you not just for your vote, but for your attention,
and
for your attention for 4 years, and for longer.
And what's also fascinating to me, it seems like, is that the right, from my perspective, has always had this Masada complex, right? Because they are, insofar as that, they are constantly under siege as far as they're concerned, because any amount of progress, particularly that, like social emancipations that we see. And look, we're talking about almost an exclusively white party that is, male dominated. And so there is a, there's a reason why they should feel under siege in some ways, because look, the pie, there's only so much pie in terms of, the pecking order of society. And if you're number one and everyone else is number 2 or 5 or however you want to say that, and all of a sudden it's like, we're actually going to start to flatten this out a little bit, you're going to lose. And there's this sense that they're constantly under siege. Who is, assaulting them changes.
Yeah.
Muslims, gays, and, then it's,
I mean, it was Latin American immigrants, then
yes,
Muslims,
it sort of cycles,
refugees.
It cycles around a little bit,
yeah.
but and so they're constantly sort of like in a state of heightened alert. Yeah. And in some levels, that they're more engaged throughout the sort of the entire process.
I mean, they what defines the right, what unifies them is their weird, complex victimology. Like, to be honest, like they feel themselves as being constantly under siege. And I think that's also why the right has an easier time unifying their base, because at the end of the day, it's an easier bit of sort of sleight of hand to say, well, what's causing all your problems? Well, it's the influx of migrants from the global South. I think that when you talk about leftist critiques of like the influx of migrants from the global South, you say, okay, well, the issue here is not that immigrants are agents of some sort of globalist order to like try to denigrate American society. They're the primary victims of what we call like global capital, like the influx of capital and the destabilization of the global South. And sans anyone in mainstream media putting forth that like intervening variable between the influx of migrants and like social decay and saying, hey, yeah, like both these things are related, but not in the way you think, you end up with the right just runs ramshot over that kind of narrative.
I want to get to your piece about coronavirus, but let's play this video because the coronavirus is one of those things where, one of those, I guess, like events, if you will, that sort of connect politics. And I think, during the last debate, I felt like the candidates up there, all of them, obviously I would like my favorite candidate to take the lead on it.
Yeah.
Failed to sort of like take advantage of that opportunity to explain like, hey, there's a relationship between coronavirus is why we have a society, right? Like, it is a perfect metaphor. But all right, let's play this clip that somebody sent me and see what they were talking about. He said it was very odd.
Bloomberg has, and maybe somewhere other than American Samoa will turn out to be Bloomberg country. But if that's it, what happens to Mike Bloomberg in this race, Rob?
I think that Mike Bloomberg should keep his war chest there and help someone that can win. I think that he said he would spend up to $1 billion, no matter who the winner was, and I think he ought to start preparing. We'll see what happens the rest of the night, but preparing to start doing some money transfers.
You know what I've been imagining? A meeting convened by the Reverend Al Sharpton between Mike Bloomberg and Democratic Party likely nominee Bernie Sanders.
Listen, you're stirring things up.
Yeah. Senator Sanders is still one of the 2 front runners at this point. We don't know how things are going to go. California's going to be huge. Texas is going to be huge for him. We'll see. If he ends up fighting to the death with Joe Biden, it looks like Bernie's going to pull it out and he's going to be the nominee. He's the only candidate in the Democratic field who said, I don't want Mike Bloomberg's money. Oh, he wants to get Donald Trump out of the White House. I'd rather not have it than than give up any benefit that he's going to give me. Does somebody like you, who knows everybody in the Democratic Party, does somebody who has a good faith reputation and is a good negotiator who has credit with all sides, step in then to try to undo that, to try to make sure that Bloomberg's money still runs?
I don't.
I gotta say, I gotta hand it to my buddy. That was bizarre. And first off, look, Mike Bloomberg can do whatever he wants. Not only can he do whatever he wants, like he does whatever he wants.
Yes.
And if Mike Bloomberg wants to spend, he's going to spend $1 billion, I got news for you. He's probably 3/4 of the way there and he spent it on himself to do crap. But Mike Bloomberg can spend whatever he wants. Surely Rachel knows that.
Well, there's this really, every time this comes up and it's like something that a particular kind of like election pundit is fixated on, which is like, why would he say no to Bloomberg's money? Which is like, do you not understand that it would be terrible politics for Bernie Sanders to say, you know what? I take it back.
Right.
What exactly is she suggesting in this clip? Because it's a little bit confusing.
I'm not entirely clear.
Is she suggesting that Bloomberg would ever intervene on Bernie Sanders' behalf in the primary or the general?
She's talking about the general election. But
okay,
look,
that still doesn't make
Michael
a lot of
Bloomberg
sense.
can go out and pretend like he's running as an independent and spend all this money on advertising and make it all negative about Trump. He can go out and he can register voters. There is no way that Bernie Sanders has the ability to stop him from spending his money.
I want to freeze on all Michael Bloomberg's assets.
and as you say, the idea that Biden, that Bernie, or frankly even Biden, would like embrace Bloomberg in the general to get his money would be a horrible, strategically political thing to do.
But what if Al Sharpton told him to?
Well, but exactly. But even Biden doesn't want to go out there and say like, yeah, no, he's my patron.
Yeah.
Like Biden wants to go out and say, I told him don't spend any money, but I can't control what Mike Bloomberg does. Like, I would recommend rejecting that money for every candidate.
Every single candidate.
But in the primary, the idea that that's an issue, to me, is a way of saying like, maybe Sanders is not the right candidate because he's not going to, marshal all the forces he can to be. I mean, that scenario is introduced. In my estimation, I've seen this clip out of context, but whenever I've heard that scenario brought up in the past, my analysis of it is a way of saying, do you really want to vote for the guy who's going to, tie one hand behind his back?
Yeah.
Well, it's just weird to imply that Bloomberg would ever try to help Bernie win in the first place.
Well, Bloomberg said that he was committed to it. And when Bernie said this, he's like, well, fine, I'll save my money. But I think Bloomberg would have done it. I think he would have done it, maybe to some extent, maybe not as much with Sanders. Maybe he would have said like, I'm sinking money into, Michael Bennett's race in, Colorado. Or
him helping is him buying influence for the future too.
You can't buy influence with Bernie Sanders.
Well, you can if you want to push certain senators or what. I mean, there's different ways. You don't necessarily buy his gratitude, but you buy influence because you buy influence. You have $1 billion.
I agree. But I mean, I think, I agree with your analysis, but I also think this is about just like wanting Sanders to take billionaire money. I think this is about like the fact that
bend the knee.
And also, Sanders is out there proving that you simply don't need to, have high-powered donors. You don't need to take billionaire money. You don't need to have super PACs in order to run an effective political campaign in this country. And that messaging, that disabusing of the Democratic Party base from the narrative of like, well, you got to take money. Otherwise, how are you going to build a $2 billion war chest to lose to Trump? That has a very deleterious effect on the ability of consultants to make money and part of campaigns.
Yeah.
Because if you're not taking money from super PACs, if you're not engaging in that network of
fundraising,
you're showing that it doesn't need to be done. So how is my friend going to get a job? How is the political media consultant industrial complex, which is incredibly incestuous, going to keep making money off campaigns? Like if a Bernie Sanders entirely grassroots funded campaign means a lot of people's job prospects in the consultancy are at the very least are threatened. Out the window. I mean, look, come on, let's be honest. Like, how often do we hear about how bad David and Sirota and Bree and Brianna Joy Gray are at running a campaign, despite the fact that they've run one of the most effective campaigns? It's because they're outside of that network. And so criticizing them about the way they run that campaign, despite how effective it's been, is fine. But the people who sunk Kamala's campaign and Warren's campaign, they're fine. The Ian Sams of the world are absolutely fine because they operate in those networks. So this is about Bloomberg and wanting to show some sign of unity and not wanting to handicap yourself. But it's also about not wanting to stop the gravy chain for a very specific type of person.
It is the Serpico situation, right? Like they're worried because Serpico's not taking the money.
Yeah.
And when you don't take the money, it makes everybody nervous. It makes everybody nervous because if everybody thinks that you're gonna turn on us. Now, for 90% of the audience who are younger than I am, go and just Google
Serpico on Netflix. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. You should watch it. But at the very least, just go and
go to Wikipedia.
It's a true story about a cop in New York City who just refused to go on the take.
Yeah.
And it freaked everybody out, and so they basically set him up.
Yeah. And didn't they shoot him in the face?
You're like, what the hell? Yeah.
Well, they ended up shooting him in the face.
Spoiler alert.
Well, I mean, that's not what the movie's about.
Serpico lived.
The story's like what? It's like 3.
I think he's alive still. Yeah.
I know he's still alive.
I think he's still alive.
All right, you guys continue this conversation. I'm going to grab another slice of pizza.
The story is older than I am, the Serpico story. I don't think I can spoil it. It's like trying to spoil Sixth Sense at this point.
Well, I think that exactly what you were just saying is correct in that, like, I said a few weeks ago, when Sanders was looking a lot more likely to, like, sort of be running away with it, I said what you're going to see is a lot of elected officials who actually, like, especially ones who have worked with him, would actually be fairly comfortable, like, saying, all right, like, I'll get behind Sanders. What you're not going to see is people who depend for their livelihood on the current system of financing campaigns. Like, those are the people who, and the people who see themselves as the future staff of these presidential administrations, and like they have a lot of sway internally.
Absolutely, and it's also. Oh, go ahead.
I was talking to some people about this earlier today, and we've talked a lot about how for these people it's not ideological. They just want to keep their jobs, and they don't think that they're gonna get a job in a Sanders administration. Why do they think that? What makes them so uniquely unqualified to work in a Sanders administration?
Well. When you look at what the Center for American Progress, who it has on its foreign policy team, and the sorts of events they put on, it's pretty easy for me to think that they're all thinking we would never get work in a Sanders administration.
Well, because
do you think that's an indication that it is at least partially ideological?
Well, I mean,
certainly.
Go ahead. Oh, no, I was going to say, I think a lot of their jobs don't really mesh with not necessarily the Sanders campaign, but what you would ostensibly think their job actually is. Like we talk about people, people in the pundit class, people who your Jonathan Chase of the world. It's like their job isn't to like objectively interpret what's going on in society or be correct about social phenomenon or even be like, a good sort of avatar for a very particular type of Republican or far right person. Their job is to coddle liberals. Their job is to coddle centrists. Their job is to like to coddle the reader into thinking that they, to flatter their sensibilities, to make them feel they're smarter than people who are not reading. And in I'll say under a Sanders regime, a bloody Sanders regime, like that. I mean, there'll still be job prospects for those kinds of people whose like job is just ostensibly to like grift and help other people grift. But like the number of those jobs are going to be a lot smaller, and so like this
Drain in the swamp.
And I think that and then you have like the sort of the people who have intertwined like the job prospects of that consultant class, of that sort of elite liberal class, with what they believe is society functioning as proper, as it's supposed to function. I think that there are people who are non-ideological. This is just my job, who are trying to put their job. But then there are the people who they've convinced to say, well, me doing my job is a sign that society is working properly. It's a sign that society is working as, if I'm not in this position, there's a problem here. And so I think that it's hard to extricate those two groups of people who are like actually materially affected by what's going on, and the people they've convinced to have some sort of stakes in their own personal in the personal well-being of that particular person.
All right, there seems to be some. Let's turn this up. There seems to be some voting issues in Austin, Texas.
I am really eager to see what happens today. The results could look very different based on the last couple of days in Texas.
I feel like there's been a lot of national punditry about the Latino vote in the Democratic primary. And it's been a little bit facile and a little bit reductive. And we have seen Senator Sanders make great strides in terms of the way that he has tried to build organizing efforts among Latino communities. But what should a national audience understand about the various Latino communities inside Texas and the types of appeal that the leading candidates might have for them?
Well, one thing about the Hispanic vote in Texas, and our experience over the last number of years, is that it is not monolithic. The assumption is that the Hispanic vote is like the Hispanic vote in California or the Hispanic vote in Nevada or the Hispanic vote somewhere else. The Hispanic vote in Texas tends to be a little bit more conservative, small c, not big C. Republicans tend to do well with Hispanic voters here to a degree that you don't see in a lot of other places. I don't necessarily think that Senator Sanders has a lock on the Hispanic vote in Texas the way he did say in Nevada. For one thing, the Castro brothers, Secretary Julian Castro obviously ran for president, got out of the race, supported Senator Warren, and his brother, Congressman Joaquin Castro, who has also supported Senator Warren, have been barnstorming South Texas, their home city of San Antonio, but also the Rio Grande Valley, hoping to get votes out for Senator Warren. I think she's the sleeper today. I'm curious to see where she lands. I think that she will do well in the Hispanic community and maybe take some of those votes away from Senator Sanders the way that he dominated in Nevada.
Steve Carell and Fox Hunter is right. I'm also willing to see where Warren lands in this.
I feel like in a normal cycle, you can extrapolate a little bit from money spent towards results expected. It doesn't feel like that's the dynamic in Texas right now. Am I reading that right?
Well, you're correct that he spent a ton of money in Texas. I wish I could show you the amount of mail that we've all gotten from Mayor Bloomberg in the last couple of months. Oh, my goodness, the amount of money that was spent on that direct mail. But there's not really any reason to think, based on what we're seeing the last couple of days, that he is going to stay at that level that Steve Kornacki quoted a couple of minutes ago. The early vote is one thing. I think the dynamic of this race really has pivoted off of Saturday. Vice President Biden got very significant endorsements over the last couple days, including Congresswoman Veronica Escobar in El Paso, State Senator Carol Alvarado in Houston, State Representative Jessica Gonzalez in Dallas. There's a consolidation happening, I think, over the last couple of days. I was skeptical, Rachel, honestly, coming into tonight, that Vice President Biden could overtake Senator Sanders if the early vote came in strong for Senator Sanders. Just numerically, it was a math problem for the vice president. But hearing Steve say that Joe Biden slightly beat Bernie Sanders in Dallas County, slightly beat Bernie Sanders in Harris County in the early vote, those are massive population centers. And now I'm beginning to think maybe Joe Biden's going to win Texas. We'll see when the votes come out.
Evan Smith, CEO and Editor-in-Chief, Texas Tribune. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And a break for our coverage. When we come back, we have a new characterization of an existing race.
All right.
And don't forget, we have a Texas poll.
Well, if Biden wins Texas, it's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, from the perspective of progressives, writ large, and certainly from Sanders' perspective. Sanders needs to win in Texas, it seems to me, and excuse me, it's significant. Do I believe that guy?
That Latino voters are going to go for Warren?
I don't. I mean, I don't know what the impact of their congressman. I don't know.
I don't think the Castro. I mean, I don't know. I don't know Texas politics. I don't think the Castro brothers are going to drive a huge amount of votes, but.
Who knows?
Every little bit helps.
Right.
I've been told you don't want Castro support, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that the guy is sort of taking the numbers seriously, but not Bloomberg's number seriously.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's sort of well, these are just early numbers, but these early numbers seem to be good for Biden.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure I follow that. We'll see. Let's talk a little bit about your coronavirus, your COVID-19 piece. We don't say what I just said.
Okay.
In part because it mimics a little bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it also tends to get us demonetized.
Wait, what gets you demonetized?
That word. So COVID-19.
COVID-19
is okay.
All right.
But the other word, apparently, advertisers don't want to be.
They don't want to be associated with it. I see.
I don't
All
know.
right, COVID-19.
COVID-19 though is almost like the ingredient in some of the things that the advertisers say. That's what it sounds like. Now with COVID-19, that type of thing. But all right. So, but your piece, basically, I mean, you I don't want to characterize it, but you characterize it.
Yeah. The piece was it was about how we have a president who believes politics is what happens inside the TV.
Right.
And that other people, he sort of doesn't feel like that other people are entirely real, and so things that happen to them aren't entirely real either. And what matters is the story being told about Donald Trump on TV. And because of the general Republican tendency to stack their administrations with incompetent cronies, which is now made worse by the fact that his incompetent cronies are also surrounded by his own like corrupt looters, like there's a real potential that the government response to this could be disastrous. And I linked it to a tendency in political punditry, which Peter Baker from the New York Times expressed at its most extreme form, which is the I don't vote tendency, because it would make me no longer impartial. And Peter Baker said not only that he does not vote, but that he does not have strong positions on public issues. Like, it was literally like, I also don't think about things.
Right. I believe that.
Well, yes. And my colleague Osita was like, I don't want Peter Baker voting. So I'm fine with him not voting.
I feel that too.
But I think that's a tendency, because if you have, first of all, if you are comfortable enough that actual politics, like that, if you're comfortable enough that the government, nothing it can do can really harm you or make your life inconvenient, and you also have no political commitments, you intentionally have no political commitments, it's really easy to just play into Trump's tendency to just believe that everything we're talking about matters only in the sense of how it will eventually look on TV.
Right, because what you're saying is that there is no stakes.
Yeah, there are no stakes.
So it's all measured on the pure drama.
Yeah.
But there's no stakes. So in other words, like, Jenny telling Billy that he's a jerk is just as important as, like, maybe the person who has the antidote to
the fact that the CDC
disease
couldn't develop working tests.
Right. It's just the sheer drama, no stakes.
Yeah.
There's no measuring of stakes. All the stakes are equal at that point.
Yeah.
And so is that a problem with Trump, or is it a problem with the coverage, or is it both?
It's both, and it's two things that are self-reinforcing. Like the president who is obsessed only with the media narrative, and this is really just like the sort of very top tier of the press, and I think it's primarily at a couple newspapers and on TV much of the time. But for whom, like, the crisis of the Trump presidency is not that he's causing material harm to people, but that it's something we all talk about. The crisis is not that material harm is coming to people because of his administration, but because it sort of he's a drama queen.
Right. Right.
So my conclusion was that it's very easy to escape material harm from a corrupt government or an authoritarian government if you are relatively well off and you live in a relatively safe city. You cannot avoid a pandemic if it actually gets out of hand. Like, it will come to the rich neighborhoods and the poor neighborhoods.
That is why, in the last debate, I was upset that Sanders in particular, but all the Democratic candidates it sort of avoided this, because, for Sanders, apparently, we may have new data about this, but in terms of just sort of the polling before we started seeing widespread voting, was that he was lagging with suburban women.
Mm-hmm.
That was his sort of cohort that was the most sort of like difficult for him. And this COVID-19 is exactly the thing that resonates. Like, this is the great equalizer. Like you say, there's no escaping this. There is no... You don't sit this one out.
Yep.
Because you make 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, that whatever.
Yeah.
You don't sit it out. There's simply no way that you can sort of like avoid all that, even if you're in the suburbs, unless you decide to stay in your house the entire time. But people are going to deliver stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to have other people who are not living that way. And this is the first real, potentially like sort of crisis that is not made by Trump.
Yes.
Like one that is like sort of external. And these things come up from time to time in presidencies. Could be a housing crisis, could be a massive threat to the financial system. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be any number of things. This is the first one that really has struck, or has the potential to strike the Trump administration.
And what is especially alarming is that, like, we all know his response is not going to be, well, we got to get this right.
Right.
Like, literally, I think
we've got to portray this as if it's right.
Right.
And those things don't necessarily sort of like line up.
No, they don't. Yeah.
It's not an insane theory to say, like, these things sometimes just blow over.
Yeah.
And so, it is worth the risk to pretend like it's not even happening.
Yeah.
And with the hopes that chance that it blows over.
Yeah.
And I think that's his tendency.
Yeah.
Let's just, ride it up, because the other option is like that he actually has to do some reading and find out that you can't like have so the vaccine's not going to be ready tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been taking an extra pack of emergency every day because that's all my health insurance affords me. But I mean, no, I agree with you. I haven't had a chance to read your article yet. I apologize, but I'm illiterate. But I mean, what you're describing, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, definitely, I think that the Trump administration and the sort of reality show aspects of it have led to radical, even led to that tendency becoming more extreme. But I mean, I feel as though like that tendency was already there. Like the idea of the politics is an issue of optics. It's always going to be an optics issue. Like how do we control the narrative and make sure that people don't necessarily feel as though we are out of control of it? And I would hazard this is obviously a weird comparison to draw, but I would draw a comparison to the Obama administration in the ways in which the Democratic Party were losing large numbers of seats around the country, and how after Obama left office, it was sort of a wake-up call to that. And so I wonder if this is, again, another instance of like Trump stepping into a position and the infrastructure to call out these particular tendencies that he has is just not in place. I guess like you mentioned with it, there's just, of course he's taking it to the nth degree, but we simply don't have a media establishment that is geared towards putting things in the terms of material harm to people, because each political party has their own sort of like their own stakes in not broaching that topic. Like here are how policies cause material harm to real people.
Right. Yeah. And I think that what I think we're describing as a missed opportunity for Sanders is an opportunity to use the platform of a debate to say, like, obviously I can't stop a pandemic, but if my sort of package of preferred policies was in place, like people would have paid sick leave so they wouldn't be spreading it at work. Like people would be able to make sure their kids can get treated for free at the hospital. And I think, to tie it into part of his entire project and saying, like, it's not even strictly a healthcare issue. It is a workplace rights and workplace power issue and all these other things too.
I mean, the argument, this is a little bit reductive, but it's really basically like saying, like, my policies call for wellness.
Yes.
And when we, the thing is, there's a lot of metaphors you could, when we have economic dips, we are strong enough as a society that we can sustain these things without immiserating significant portions of our society. When we are struck with a pandemic, because we have the social infrastructure, not just the physical infrastructure, but the social infrastructure, we have a more healthy populace because they all have health insurance, like you say. We can withstand these challenges. It is like, he could have made like a national security issue of this, that my policies strengthen the fabric of our society by a pandemic is really the perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, the weakest amongst us that is how we should be measured as a society.
Mm-hmm.
How well is the weakest amongst us doing? Because that is where we are most vulnerable. And, it is the most infirm, those people who can't go in and go to the doctor's office and just say, like, hey, something's going on with me. Check this out. As opposed to just walking around for 3 or 4 weeks infecting, gosh knows how many people.
Yeah. And not just in this country, but in the whole world, right? because this is quickly becoming a global pandemic.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. I don't know if you guys read it, but Slavoj Žižek published a piece in RT where he said that the you-know-what virus will hasten the fall of capitalism.
Oh.
And one thing he said that made a lot of was, Bernie's arguing for a national health network. Does this not point in the direction of needing a global health network? Like, we're really only as healthy or safe as the lowest person in the world right now, considering how linked everything is.
I think it would have been a difficult needle to thread, but Sanders also could have made a case about the precariousness of like global like trade logistics, like which are supposed to be the backbone of this entire international economic order.
Yeah,
as like logistics that can just be like interrupted, like
wiped out immediately.
And Bernie is to some degree a trade protectionist. Like, there are some similarities between the way he talks and the way Trump talks. Although, of course, Bernie has like more of a coherent plan, and Trump, it's all bluster.
Yeah. Let's go to Kornacki. Biden has been declared the winner of Tennessee.
As more votes come in. And I just want to draw your attention quickly to one more thing that just jumped out at me. You see basically all the vote is in Virginia right now. We keep asking this question about turnout. We talk about Virginia as the kind of state, especially in those D.C. suburbs, where Democrats think they have high energy. If you add up all the votes that were cast tonight in this Virginia Democratic primary, right now with a few more to come in, 1,306,560. 1,306,560. That is the number of votes cast in tonight's Democratic primary. Remember that number. Take a mental picture of it. I'm about to show you what it was 4 years ago. 1,360,000. It was 782,000 4 years ago. Turnout in Virginia has nearly doubled in 4 years. Yeah. 782 to over 1.3 million. Where is that? It's all over the state, obviously. But again, the D.C. suburbs of Northern Virginia, the epicenter of the blue wave of 2018.
What we're seeing is resistance is coming out big time.
Yeah.
And that has been the sort of the trend, right? I mean, that was the trend. In South Carolina, that's sort of the underreported story. I mean, it comes out, the story is how well Biden did with black folk, but the big surge in turnout apparently was with, sort of the wealthy white suburbs in South Carolina. I mean, it's the resistance vote that's coming out. Well, and they're deciding that Biden is the best shot to take on Trump. And this is,
I think that
what we saw in 2018. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're right.
No, I think they were lied to. I think they were lied to by Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. And I mean, I think it's like, I legitimately think it's shameful. Like, I think it's shameful to have looked at Joe Biden's performance thus far and to have pinned your hopes on him.
Well, how much of this do you think is them being lied to and really believing that Biden is the best answer?
If they had believed that, he would have actually been winning before tonight.
Yeah. Well,
they would have picked him. They were like Iowans vote for Pete Buttigieg over Joe Biden, because they saw the two of them, the resistance ones. They were like, this Pete guy, he might be our best shot.
I was going to ask, don't you think that their class interests might play a role as well? Like, is there any way that Bernie could get these well-to-do white liberals to vote for him in the primary?
In the primary? He could if it would be like if the party signaled, don't worry, we think he's electable, instead of screeching the exact opposite.
Well, that's never going to happen.
I think it had a potential to happen. I actually do think it had potential to happen, and then what we saw them slam the brakes on that.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see the Washington Post story where Schumer was like, of course he can win?
Of course Sanders can win.
I saw that Nancy Pelosi said something to that
Pelosi and
effect.
Schumer both,
Yes, they were coming around.
They were coming around.
I mean, it's from my perspective, like, it's almost malfeasance to like pretend Joe Biden can win versus Trump. Like, I mean, it's like anyone who with clear eyes has watched Joe Biden's performance or any of his press conference can tell that he is not capable of running a Dairy Queen, much less the United States of America. And so, like, to de-emphasize the fact, forget Joe Biden. I mean, forget Klobuchar and Buttigieg from him, but just the media's refusal to engage with the level of like incoherence there is troubling. Like, it's a little troubling. But I mean, like that's the.
I mean, look, I don't know if Biden can beat Trump or not. No, but nobody really does at this point. It's just too early. the real question is, because I mean, look, if I was running Biden's campaign, I would just say, like, you're doing two campaign things a week.
Yeah.
We're going to send out a lot of surrogates.
Yep.
You're just going to do big events twice a week.
The lack of ground game hasn't hurt him, it doesn't look like.
Well, I mean, there's also there's we were saying the same thing about Trump. No ground game.
No ground game.
Barely going out because he's just,
Right.
sort of like mailing it in. If I was, if Biden ends up being the nominee, I think it's way too early to say. But I'm just saying, I would say you're staying indoors.
Yep.
You're going to pretend like you're the incumbent, and we're just going to let Donald Trump do the work in terms of like driving out the vote.
Yeah.
And hope for the best. Send out a bunch of surrogates. I don't know if that will work or not. All I know is that I think that like if you look at all the factors in which you would make an assessment, he doesn't do well in those factors at this point. Can he win? Nobody knows.
I mean, I think whether or not he wins comes down to how involved Obama wants to become in like the general election. Like if he wants to get out there and like hold his hand throughout the entire process, that's up to him. But I don't think it's in Obama's best interest. I think ultimately, I think Obama's very concerned about Obama's legacy, and I think being too attached to Joe Biden, the way things are going, is.
I think that ship is sailed.
Exactly.
I mean, I think people are going to know. Listen, the reason why Buttigieg, and I would imagine we're going to find out ultimately Klobuchar as well, they did this was because of Obama's encouragement, right? I mean, the reporting is there.
Yeah.
More or less in terms of Buttigieg.
Yeah.
He didn't say endorse Biden. He just called him
called him up and said
peak leverage right now.
Yeah, peak leverage.
And it was like, I'm not telling you it's 4. I'm just telling you 2 + 2. And that's if we are to believe that, that telling of the story. Because I think I think we know that because Obama wanted us to know that.
Yeah.
And Team Obama wanted us to know that. Now, we still don't know, like, we're looking here now.
How's Oklahoma
I
doing?
mean, what strikes me as amazing is that Warren is not doing so great in Oklahoma. What is this? She is viable in one state. Now, she is viable in Massachusetts, but she is in 3rd place at this point. I mean, let's just do like a very, very dirty version of this right now. And I don't mean risque.
Dude, Biden's winning Massachusetts? Jesus.
So if
that's not very much vote in.
So let's just say Biden wins all the delegates of all the places he's in the head right now.
Yes.
Okay, just to sort of like, so we got Virginia at 99. We got 110 at North Carolina. That's 210. Maine, 234. Alabama, 284. Oklahoma, 86. Oklahoma, 286. 13. 93. 120. 223. Am I 223 or 323? 223? 323. And then Mass, 4. I don't know. Let's just say 4 to 12. Tennessee, 475. If you have Bernie winning Texas and California, and remember, I'm doing this dirty. I'm just saying no splits here.
And we're treating it like these are all winner take all states.
Right. Yeah, they're not. I'm just doing this. It's it seems to me, depending on how Bernie does in Texas and California, and Utah, which I think he won last time. Minnesota looks like it's going towards Biden big time, but it's early. We could be at a situation where, like, Sanders is in 2nd place in terms of delegate count.
Yeah.
Not a distant second.
No, not distant, but.
And then it's just sort of like, the next debate is not until a week from Sunday, and there is another 10 states that are happening next Tuesday, right? So Biden is safe in that respect.
Yes.
I think the peril for Biden is debates.
Yeah.
And sort of
now there's going to be a lot fewer people at him.
And they seem to have figured out the strategy, which is the less, and if people really, really go back in their memory, the less Biden is out there, the better he does.
Yep.
We were saying the same thing about Hillary Clinton. I mean, that was just the case. And one never knows. One would imagine.
I don't know how much of Minnesota is in so far, but the only exit poll I conducted was my mother, who said Warren would win. I think it's a long.
You heard it here first, folks.
I have lost faith in your mom's
and my mother's
punditry. All right, let's go and see what they're saying. Biden wins Oklahoma. State won by Sanders in 2016.
A potential Biden renaissance, including, yes, Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin. There have been a number of requests put in to the Treasury Department for any and all records related to Burisma. That's a treasure trail.
Yeah, that's what you want to hear at his victory party. That's what you want to hear at the front runners victory party. Well, Senate Republicans are
around the former vice president at this point. And I think about a moment last night when Mayor Pete Buttigieg endorsed him in Texas. One of the moments I think that stand out from the perspective of Team Biden was the number of times Mayor Pete
said he was innocent of all charges in dealing with
Ukraine
Burisma.
were raised. And I think you will see a closing of the ranks around Joe Biden again if and when the Republicans try to play that again.
Mike, thanks. Let's go to the other side of the country. We have some potential news out of the Bloomberg effort in West Palm. Josh Letterman covering for us. Josh, what do you have?
West Palm.
Well, Brian, the Bloomberg campaign started the night exuding confidence with the campaign manager, Kevin Sheehy, telling us that they believe that he would be viable in nearly every state, if not every state tonight. A few hours
I'm not going to hire
later,
that dude.
The mood is very different here at Bloomberg's event and with Bloomberg officials that we've been speaking with. And it's
How can there be a mood at this event? It appears to be an empty auditorium.
Joe Biden is now projected to win.
They've locked the door.
Bloomberg officials had been
They're not letting
pointing to
anybody
for
in.
weeks as the ones where they felt the most confident, where they thought
we are now
Bloomberg
tuning
had
into
a chance to win,
Bloomberg
including
HQ live
Virginia,
inside a
Oklahoma,
volcano
which was just projected.
in the shape of
Bloomberg
a
had said he
skull.
was another one projected to go to Joe Biden, and we just
I legit
now
saw a guy on the
have
subway
news
with a
from the
Bloomberg
campaign
button today.
manager,
Like a
Kevin
first
Sheehy,
like.
saying, tonight,
Maybe
only
he might have been on
wow.
the payroll, but
I know. I hope that Bloomberg is paying literally all these voters.
I would not be surprised if Bloomberg was paying people to wear his buttons, honestly.
This sounds like Bloomberg's going to drop out.
Donald Trump in November. What you don't hear in that statement is any assertion that he plans to stay in the race no matter what.
It sounds like he's going to drop out.
Now, obviously, the Bloomberg
Imagine having that much
campaign
money
is
though.
not saying in
You
the
can just like
statement
blow 700 million. Like, oh, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm tired. This is boring.
more sober tone coming out
I'm gonna
of
go
Super
buy a
Tuesday
person.
results.
You know, like whatever.
For that news.
You know,
Great coverage from you for that campaign tonight in West Palm.
Fascinating to be
and
in
the
that
question
room where they're like trying to justify to Bloomberg the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're saying, you know what? Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
We stopped Bernie Sanders. And that's really what this was about.
It was, I mean, honestly, just if I remember the chronology correctly, he jumped in when Warren had her surge. Because I think, like everyone else, he never thought Sanders was never thought Sanders was serious. And he is so evil rich that he found Warren to be a sufficient enough threat to want to jump in to stop.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I mean, mission accomplished. He did it. Everyone, really a lot of really good work all around for people in
this is I really it's upsetting. I mean, I feel like we're looking at either a disaster or a slower disaster.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to drain everybody of hope, but there is certainly if you had, if we had convened 10 hours ago and said, never mind a week ago, and said like, what are the scenarios where we would panic? We would be in that scenario.
We'd be in the general terrain.
Yes. I mean, something, dramatic happens in California and something dramatic happens in Texas. But the problem is that even if Sanders wins really big in California, you have no intervening events between now and next Tuesday.
Nothing is going to happen between now and the next election.
And you will not even get the full accounting of California.
Yes, for a while.
So even if Sanders, takes all 400 delegates there, we won't know that for days, if not weeks.
Yeah.
And it is clear, becoming clearer and clearer that the dynamic in this race is the voters just want somebody who can beat Trump. Yes. And if everybody agrees on it, everybody else is willing to go like, okay.
Yep, they'll go along. And I think we have a group of very dedicated voters who, basically have been told to not only buy into the idea of electability as defined by these Democrats, but to buy into the idea of momentum, which coincided with what appeared to be a coordinated effort to make it seem as if Sanders didn't have momentum and then to give Biden all the momentum.
Well, look, like you said, we were seeing signs where, Schumer said, yeah, he can win.
Yeah.
Where we were seeing stories in the Washington Post, right? Where it's like, yes, the Senate's not that worried about it.
Yeah.
And we heard from some supposedly, frontline House members. But to a large extent, you saw a movement by the party to some form of reluctance accept, So, the reality is Biden overperformed in South Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, Clyburn was a big part of that. But that doesn't, they were able to build on that. Had Biden won by 3 percentage points in South Carolina, I don't think any of this
he'd
happens.
be done. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about how there are no intervening events. Doesn't it count that we're going to start getting subpoenas in the Burisma affair?
That might rally the resistance Dems around him even more.
It could. You're right. People could be like, hey, wait a second, I forgot about this.
Yeah. I forgot about it, and I do this for a living.
Yeah, but what I'm afraid what we're going to get is just subpoenas. For instance, there's not going to be enough movement. This is, we're in hey, what's this extra server you have during, the 14th Benghazi committee, essentially. Yeah. It's going to be much more developed. We're going to see it crest.
And if Bernie's
right before the convention.
Yeah. Well, also, if Bernie's treatment of Hillary's emails is any indication, he really doesn't want to throw fuel on the fire of the personal scandals of his opponents.
I would, just go back to what Sam was saying earlier. I think there was a more or less, not coordinated, but just across the canvas, effort to not go too hard on Biden. To not, Kamala Harris was positioned many times to be able to just absolutely take Biden out, but unable to follow up. Not only just because she agreed with not integrating schools, but also just because. Why you don't want to make waves. You don't want to make waves in the Obama world. I think that if you saw the candidates actually going after Biden for his lack of support from Obama, for his horrible history on criminal justice, his horrible history on Social Security, this would be harder to understand. But Biden is not like Bernie in the sense where the more you learn about him, the more it ignites his base. The more you learn about Biden, the less you like Biden.
Both Warren and Sanders failed
to go after him
to attack Biden. And, at the time it seemed like a good idea. You want to be able to take his voters. You don't want to alienate them. I think that was maybe, in retrospect, a misunderstanding of why people were supporting him.
Yeah.
That at least part of it was a function of.
Right. Part of it is they believe he has the best chance to win against Trump. And the way you undercut that is not by saying, look at this guy's record on bankruptcy, but by saying a few weeks ago, he pretended he'd been arrested in South Africa.
Right. That's
crazy.
Stunning failure. I mean, we didn't talk about it enough on this show.
Yeah. It's one of the most,
and look, it's stunning.
It is.
And there's something pathological going on here.
Yeah.
There's no relationship between his staff and him, because the one thing you would do if you're his staff is like, hey, dude, 2 rules. No lying about stuff.
Yeah.
To burnish your career, because he had a history of this. Like, I graduated number 3 in my class in law school and blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is, don't use other people's lines.
Yeah.
And there's clearly a breakdown there. Now, I will say this. 3 days ago, we basically said, we are no longer going to be highlighting Joe Biden's cognitive decline. And now, we reversed ourselves today, and we apologize for that because we have rescinded that. But I think it's indicative of sort of like broadly the overconfidence of people who were worried about Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Biden got confused, like we've all been there when you're drunk at a party and you tell somebody a story and you realize halfway through that it actually happened to your friend.
We've all been there when we're drunk at a party.
How many times have you been there, though? That's the question. This guy's there a lot.
Yeah.
He visits that place a lot, apparently.
I agree.
It's a summer home there.
Last time I was drunk, I had one too many Pabst Blue Ribbon. Then I told my friend that I was also arrested with Nelson Mandela. That's a classic drunk story. It's silly, but this race is primary.
Colorado results.
AP called what? For Bernie.
Yeah,
that's good.
No, like this race has been full of moments like that. Even Pete Buttigieg's like fake black endorsement thing, like it got swept under, and it happened multiple times. Like it got swept under the rug.
Wow. I'm sorry, Maine is super close, but it's only 11% in. Sorry.
No. I mean, it's just, it feels like every time we have these conversations, people talk about, or rather, in the wake of Trump being elected, people talked about how Trump was eroding norms, as though he was actively and proactively the only person participating in that process. But it seemed even more clear that like what occurred was that people saw what you could get away with when a Trump-like figure in office, and they just decided that nothing mattered anymore. Like, you had like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter because Trump isn't, like, someone like Trump became president. So like, I guess we don't have to do things with any kind of integrity or honesty.
Let's listen. I want to hear what Karnak is saying about Colorado. It seems like all 4 of them.
Probably about 2/3. We'll see what the final turnout estimate is here. But yeah, in the early vote, and again, anytime you hear early vote, pre-South Carolina, this is what Colorado looked like. Now, because so much of it is early vote, this may end up being closer to what Colorado ends up looking like. Becomes a bit of a what if for Biden. But yeah, Bloomberg, nearly a quarter of the vote with a lot, 400,000 or so already in and already counted.
And I think I'm right to say this, but we saw Mayor Bloomberg win in American Samoa. We haven't seen him in the top 2 in any other states other than this pending result in Colorado.
And here, okay, so we say mail-in vote 24. Let's see what happens with the same day. Let's see if the Bloomberg number comes down. To get under 15, he'd really have to be getting clobbered in the same day. But let me show you another state where there was a significant amount of early vote, not as much. If you remember early in the night in North Carolina, we were showing you 2 things in those returns. The initial early vote returns in North Carolina showed Biden up 6 over Sanders, and they showed Bloomberg well over the threshold of 15%. Where do things stand now with about 50% of the vote in? 2 things have happened. You can see Biden has opened up a 12-point lead now over Sanders. So as the same day vote comes in, Biden is moving up. He's building his lead. And who is he moving up at the expense of? He is moving up at the expense of Michael Bloomberg more than anybody else. Bloomberg falling down to 15% with every new report.
I should have spent $2 billion.
Bloomberg share edging down and edging down. He's right at the 15% delegate viability threshold now. There is an awful lot of
It's so
same-day
bad that
vote to
anyone
come
is
in
voting
North
for
Carolina.
Bloomberg.
The trend that's being established with the same-day
It says a
vote
lot
we're
about the
seeing in
Democratic
North
Party, to be
Carolina
honest.
is tremendous
this is
movement
still
towards Joe
far
Biden.
too many.
Probably in the last couple days, folks making up their mind to vote for Biden, and it's coming at the expense of Michael Bloomberg, who is now teetering on the brink of falling below that viability threshold.
Can I ask you about one other?
Yes.
Minnesota.
Yes.
So Minnesota obviously has a couple of unique dynamics. It's like Colorado. It's another state where they had a caucus last time.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say what's normal in Minnesota. And until 5 minutes ago, they had their very popular home state senator in the race who made a late endorsement for Joe Biden. So what's happening in Minnesota?
So you can see here, again, there is some early voting in Minnesota as well. Again, not extensive as you have in other states. And what you've got here, look at this. This is another state where the evidence suggested a week. We got it.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Speak of the state we were just talking about. In Colorado, NBC
Well, we had already projected
at a date certain.
Sanders the winner there, so we were a little bit ahead of NBC on that call.
Finally,
Still good.
Suck it.
Bloomberg, 24%. So, Steve, what does that tell you?
Yeah, that mail-in vote was a ton in Colorado. And I think it is a question out there, just the pattern we're seeing in these other states where there is a big difference that's developing
aren't there states that are only vote by mail?
And the mail-in. We'll just go back
I feel
to
like
Colorado and
Oregon or
see what I'm
Washington.
Maybe
talking
Oregon or
about.
Washington.
Again, if 2/3 of the vote in Colorado was done long before South Carolina, there just isn't a lot of room there for Biden to make up ground on same day. And there isn't a lot of room there for Bloomberg to fall. And if Sanders can bank that kind of a lead, that kind of a vote, there were some demographic factors here in Colorado. Large Hispanic population. Sanders doing very well with Hispanic voters.
This is the Hispanic vote is still sort of like, I think this is
Bloomberg split there. You have to
this is that's the most important thing. And there's two things that occur to me. One is, you know, we've been waiting for Super Tuesday for a year. The people in these states have probably been thinking about Super Tuesday for maybe a week.
Yeah.
And if you start to engage, you know, a week before an election, you know, the former vice president is obviously
gonna have a
big in your mind, and there's been a lot of news about them, you know, and it just seems like, oh, that's the person we're supposed to vote for. The Hispanic vote. Colorado was one of those states. Now, North Carolina, we got to look and see, you know, what happened there. But Texas and California, if Sanders, it seems to me, you know, obviously we got to see what the delegate count is after, you know, when we assess all of this. But if Sanders has dominated the Hispanic vote, it opens up the opportunity for like a narrative that I think, you know, is
if he does it in the West and the Southwest,
it's a really important narrative that would be out there. And that is that because the Hispanic vote has always been a very difficult nut to crack, as it were. Like you know, getting the Hispanic vote mobilized.
Yeah.
People have for years been thinking about it as like a big prize.
Yeah.
This is what, you know, even George Bush was like, we've got to tap into this. I mean, this has been the demographic story. And if Sanders has sort of figured out that could be at least an important narrative, because there's going to be a constituency there that is going to be talking about that vote that is going to be not of the sort of like left per se.
Right.
At this point, isn't it more of a counter narrative if the dominant narrative is that Biden has all this momentum and he's going to win? Like, maybe this is a dumb question, but like, it seems to me like the narrative can change very quickly based on one win or another, right? And we still have most of the states left to go. So couldn't it change just as easily back in Bernie's favor if he wins some more states? Or is the media stacked against him to the point that they won't let that happen?
I mean, if Bernie ends up with more delegates at the end of this, you know, night, however, you know, you want to determine when that night ends, but it is looking now like it is, it's not necessarily likely. I mean, it's hard to tell like how this is, you know, these delegates are going to be awarded. But if Biden has the lead in delegates, even if ultimately this night will prove to have given Sanders more delegates because of California, but if he has the lead in terms of like where we're counting as of like a day or two before next Tuesday, that's the narrative. It's not just a question of like, you know, the media. Obviously, I think like he has more Biden has a lot more sort of like allies in the media, as it were, and in the establishment of the party. I mean, the guy's a former vice president. He's, Sanders was not a registered Democrat. There's a whole, ideological reasons too, but there's a whole host of reasons. But I'm saying that the narrative that Sanders is getting a significant portion of the Hispanic vote is a narrative that is much harder to deny than he's like close second. That is like, there is, when you start talking about the future of the Democratic Party, it's one thing to say young people, but everybody says young people don't vote. But if you're saying that you're able to mobilize the Hispanic vote in a way that hasn't been done before, that is a very sort of compelling, it seems to me, narrative. Now, we don't know yet that that's the case. Nevada started gave you maybe some sense to believe that, but it was a caucus. But if that's what's happening in Colorado, if that's what's happening in California and Texas, that becomes like a very compelling narrative. And there is a whole nother constituency. I guess I noticed this, I can't remember what cable news show I was watching, when there was this sort of Biden love-in type of thing, which you see, where this, they want to call it the manufacturing of consent or whatever it is. But there was one person who spoke up, and I have seen her before. I don't remember who she is. I mean, I don't, all these people seem to be the same people to me on some level, but not someone who I had seen before, speak out about Sanders. And I was sort of just surprised at how she was sort of putting the brakes on this conversation. And I think she represented maybe a Latino group, or but raised that Sanders is doing very well there. Yeah. And so you have a sort of another constituency that is, if Sanders has been able, and again, we don't know yet, but is able to mobilize the Latino vote, that's a really important thing for a lot of people. Yeah. And that may end up being a big narrative. Now, that's not what people were sort of talking about Sanders, a month ago. Right. But
well, I mean, I think there's a refusal to believe that Sanders is capable of motivating anything other than 18 to 25-year-old white males. And I think that speaks to his positionality outside the Democratic Party. I think, the idea that Biden is winning the quote unquote the black vote is going to be a narrative we're going to hear strongly in the upcoming few days, out of South Carolina and now in North Carolina. But the idea that Sanders is capable of mobilizing the Latino vote kind of contradicts this position they kind of try to put him in, where it's he doesn't have a diverse coalition. It's all bros, it's all it's all white dudes living in Brooklyn. No offense to whoever is in this room who's
everybody.
Not. Yeah, everyone. And so his ability to mobilize the Latino vote is going to be not necessarily a hard pill to swallow, but something that they're going to want to minimize. They're going to want to minimize in order to continue presenting him as a monochromatic candidate.
Right. And I guess my point is that it's not just going to be Bernie supporters who are going to want to stop that minimization. There is a heavy investment, obviously, by Latino advocates and Latino activists and people who've been working on trying to sort of mobilize that vote and create some power within that community for a long time.
I agree, and I also think that another barrier to that is that we have a lot of, and I think this is something that came out at least when people were trying to understand Warren's lack of support amongst black people in contradiction to her support of the activist black crowd. And a lot of these people, the roots writers, etc. There can still be a disconnect between the Bernie Sanders camp and the sort of the grass tops of the Latino organizing. In terms of the people the power brokers in that area. So even if
we saw that with the unions too. We saw that with the unions too. So So it's going to be imperative that he actually empowers the actual his actual
voter and not just try to negotiate power with people who are more likely to side with Biden because he's more entrenched with the establishment.
Yeah.
I should just say I'm getting a question from my daughter, and I don't know if she's watching. Probably not, but she texted me. I read a Snapchat article that Bloomberg won.
I'm not really sure how to respond to that.
Well,
They have articles on Snapchat.
I don't know if what you think is an article is what.
I thought it was just
Trust me, that is a question that keeps me up at night.
It's just like a picture of someone's junk with like Bloomberg one over it.
Yeah, I mean exactly.
It's like an article.
I think like her definition of what an article is and our definition might not be the same. I don't even want to tell you what I just texted her. I said no, but Biden is doing well, and I'm not going to say what her response was. It's interesting how things get communicated to kids in high school.
Yeah.
I can just tell you that it has to do with like his being physical with.
Yeah.
You can't unsee the photo of him kissing his granddaughter on the mouth.
That's how you get corona.
Well, fortunately, I'm told that she is not. She is not watching right now. So, but I like the fact that she has total disregard for what I'm doing. Oh, Dad, I have a question about the thing. I would never watch. I have a question about politics, but I would never watch your politics.
I feel like I'm now reliving that Larry King moment. Where
right with Ruben.
With
Hi, Mila. Hey. Guess. Hold on for 1 second.
You got an RBI?
Guess.
You got.
What's trending? What's trending on Snapchat now? Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. Just hold on one second, guys. That's fantastic. Okay, I think Bloomberg's out tomorrow.
I think he is, and I don't know. I thought I saw a story that his it seemed planted perhaps, but that his campaign was trying to convince him, because he didn't have any spending lined up and after today until he suddenly did a bunch of ads, and it seemed like they were like people in his campaign are telling him to quit, but he didn't want to. And I would imagine that they have essentially milked him for what they're going to get from him at this point.
I think at one point, what you hit in that campaign is like, how do I get a job not on his campaign?
Right.
Like,
how am I going to keep working?
Because if we go into the next stage where he wants to impact politics, but not necessarily like be a candidate.
Yeah.
I need to burnish my credibility now that I've got him to burn all this cash by telling him what he was able to do. I can now be the voice of reason and say, like, this is what you cannot do.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of guys around here who are going to tell you that you should stay in the race.
Keep going.
Because look, and maybe it's not in my best interest to tell you this, but I think you should quit, Mike. Yeah. I mean, you've won. Yeah. I mean, I just like, I honestly feel like I could write every piece of dialogue that's happening in that room.
Yeah.
And because it's just, you just think of the most craven sort of like attitude you could have.
Yeah.
And I think, you could just spread out like the classic sort of like sitcom, like this person's sassy, this person's caring, this person's sentimental.
Yeah.
But they're all craven.
Yes.
Which one is vandalizing their own HQ?
Yeah, seriously. I want to find the person who came up with that one actually.
Mike, let me just suggest one thing before we go. Maybe we light this place on fire.
Yeah, wait,
and say that a Bernie bro did it, and the other guy's going like, Bill, and I'm joking. Come on, seriously, you did a great job, Mike. It was just an idea. All right,
that's what I would do.
I know that vandalism wasn't a false flag because they did it so politely.
What's that?
The vandalism where they wrote
headquarters.
oligarch.
They spray painted oligarch or eat the rich or something, but they did it.
Wait, what is this?
Their own.
Was there actually vandalism?
No, this was the Bloomberg campaign posted a series of tweets that are apparently vandalism that they've been victims of. But like the first one was in Flint, and it was a sign that somebody spray painted on. So they bought a sign and then spray painted oligarch on it and then put it up in front of it.
Gently leaned it against the front of the office.
So in other words, someone had to go out there and dispose of it properly.
Have you ever done a science fair? They got like one of those three folder poster boards and left
eat the rich
and then like a few photos of guillotines, and then he was like, these Bernie bros, they're out of control, leaving literature right outside.
But that's emotional vandalism.
It is, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's emotional vandalism.
It's called gaslighting.
Well, that's where Left is Best came from, was vandalism that was done in Connecticut, I believe, in the wake of the Trump win. And some dude went out there to try and make it look like leftists were vandalizing something, and they left like that signature thing that the leftists do. Left is best.
That famous slogan we all know and love.
Exactly. Left is best.
Left is best.
And you know it's true because it almost rhymes. And and they found, I think they found the vandal.
What did the guy write about cops on his own driveway? Do you remember
Black's Rule?
Black's Rule.
But that was me. The statute of limitations. I'm not very creative.
You were like, what is my message again?
Sometimes you want to have like a multi-layered message, and sometimes you just want to go like, it's like no misinterpretation.
Yeah, it's really hard to misinterpret
shredded Confederate flags, Black's Rule. There's no room for ambiguity there. You don't want a lot of guessing. You want everyone, that's where you also write it in. But the funny thing about that photo is that if you look at it closely, you can see a bunch of like black chairs in the photo. He was clearly spray painting because the paint was chipping off, and so it seems as though he was like repainting some like deck chairs. He was just like, you know what? I'm going to self-vandalize, get some attention. Look, honestly, he seems like no shade. He seems like an older dude, like maybe a little bored, like a Biden type figure.
Yeah, like a very Biden type figure.
It's like sometimes you just want a little attention.
Yeah.
And so like no one was hurt.
Let's switch over to CNN for a moment and see what's going on over there. Biden is leading Massachusetts, which is super depressing for me.
But how much is it? Oh, what percentage? But that is incredibly depressing.
Only 10% is in. So
wow,
we'll
what'd
see.
you say to people?
It ddid occur to me that the neighborhood that we were in was a very much a working class.
This is live CNN, right?
Live CNN.
You can see the chip paint chairs, which is clearly. It seems as though he was re-spray painting his chairs. It was like, you know what?
Well, I got the paint.
I got the paint and Black's Rule. So
look, it is what it is.
Now it's only 10% in Massachusetts, but it did, it was 60-40 in the neighborhood we're in. It's not even a piece of data really on some level. I mean, we're talking about 30, maybe 20 homes that we reached.
Carolina, don't undercount it. You want all you can get. The fact that Joe Biden started off the night with this swath right here is great for Joe Biden. The question is, as we go through, can he sustain that? And the longer you stay, the more I'm going to check. So there we go, just checking again, still at 31% there. Let's just check up here, 18% here. Biden opening this up. You see that? Again, it's not a ton. We're only at 18%, but it's been moving up there, and you move back over as well. Remember, we spent a lot of time in Arkansas back in the day.
You and I did.
That was a long time ago. But Little Rock was not in. Last time we checked there, Joe Biden with the lead there. Mayor Bloomberg, relatively competitive here. Arkansas, one of the states that Bloomberg had hoped, if you went back a week or two, to win tonight. Again, this is evidence of the South Carolina balance.
He'd been pouring money into Arkansas for a long time.
In the state of Arkansas tonight, as we look at the results where we are now, but still some counting to do.
It's encouraging that people realize he's a piece of garbage, with all due respect. And but they also have, I feel like they have a better map. Let's listen to this.
They have a big mail-in program, so 500,000 Democratic votes arrived before Pete Buttigieg, who was getting some votes out there, quit, and another 100,000 before Amy Klobuchar quit the race. And so Bernie Sanders and Bloomberg probably did better in Colorado than they would have if more of the vote came in on Election Day. The other thing is, you look at states.
I love it when Democrats are like, we shouldn't have early voting.
The struggle going on in Maine and Massachusetts, in Oklahoma. Bernie Sanders got 64% of the vote in Maine in 2016. He got 62% of the vote in Minnesota. He got 52% of the vote in Oklahoma. And the question has always been, how much of that vote came to him as a result of antipathy toward Hillary Clinton and how much of it came to
It's
him
such a bizarre
on the strength of
way
his own
of
message.
assessing
and we're
these
getting
things.
something of a test of this here.
You pointed out before that he has been underperforming.
It's a weird comparison to be making.
His 2016.
Well, it's just a weird thing. Like, yeah, of course. Like, people are voting against all sorts of people in this. In fact, if Donald Trump loses, it's going to be because people are voting against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And you're not going to hear people go like, look, I don't know if this is a real win for the Democratic candidate because people are really more voting against Trump. I mean, look, that's...
I mean, I think that's the ideal for them. The ideal is, which is a frightening dynamic to realize exists, whereas a Trump-like president is the ideal situation for a Democrat to be in, because it's like...
Should be.
Like, you would think so. You would think so.
Well,
but
certainly everybody thought so prior to Clinton's run.
To be honest, I think she could. I think in hindsight, and even at the time, a lot of people have decided to pretend as though that race was that Trump did better. I mean, Trump did better than people expected, obviously, but that Trump was a more insurmountable force than he actually was. And I think there were a lot of cases of mismanagement. And I think, especially,
of course.
And I think,
and he still only won by a hair.
Exactly. And so I think Sands, and I think we're seeing that mismanagement what that mismanagement actually looks like when it comes to Warren's campaign and also Kamala's campaign, because you see what the Clinton staffers are capable of doing, which is not very much, when they don't have that entire brand and inertia behind them, like propping up their candidate. They're not builders. It's like they know how to maybe like coast through a victory, and when it came to actually trying to build something for Warren and Kamala, poof,
couldn't do it.
They couldn't do it. I hope Biden inherits them.
That's an existential threat to the country. We have to do it. Nobody really is sure how to do it. What that means is that, for the large part, these are not entrenched voters for one particular candidate. If you just decided in the last 3 days who you were going to support,
yes, this is a good point. This is what we were saying before.
3 hours, your support could be malleable. It could go to somebody who you did not cast your vote for, and that's frankly, in a field this divided, what we're going to need in November.
And that's a question for Joe Biden, because if he comes out of tonight doing very well, and I think we can see that is already occurring. I think the question is whether there's some sugar high here and puts a lot of pressure on him to perform at the next debate, which happens to be a CNN debate, but to perform at that next debate, not a plug, but true, but a plug.
You wouldn't do that.
But to perform at the next debate, because one of the reasons people decide late is because they're trying to figure out who can beat Donald Trump. But
yes,
it's not because
absolutely.
they love this person so much, is they want this person to beat Donald Trump. And the debate is going to matter to them when they see him, so they don't have buyer's remorse afterwards. One other point I want to make is what is going on inside the Bloomberg camp tonight.
Yeah.
And Jeff Zeleny, and you can talk about how it feels to, before you get out, sorry, Andrew.
No,
but,
oh, wow.
But
Cold.
Andrew, do you think Bloomberg, I mean, you talked about before, he's a data guy, he's going to look at the numbers. I mean, the numbers are not good.
I think Mike is going to have a tough decision tomorrow, and I think the numbers are going to drive him in a particular direction. But I do want to say that Mike Bloomberg is going to be a big reason why the Democrats win in the fall if they do win, because he has over 2,400 staffers, 200 offices.
And you said his data operation is very impressive.
Now, people think of Mike Bloomberg as a Wall Street guy. He's actually more of a tech and data guy. And his New York HQ is like a spaceship come to life. His election dashboard is like a miniaturized version of that. It's incredible.
Well, then I really think that we're underselling how horrible of a person he must be. He's got a spaceship. He's got unlimited cash, and he's barely breaking the threshold except for an American Samoa.
I want to talk about
hey, those are my favorite cookies.
He could do an
I mean, I feel like you're underselling it.
American Samoa, your favorite cookies?
Oh, that was a Girl Scout. That was a Girl Scout cookie joke. They might have changed the name to like, what is it called? Like Caramel Delights or something. It's not important. It wasn't a good joke. It was.
Did Samoas get canceled?
I don't know. I don't know what the impulse behind it was. It was the best kind of joke.
Yeah, it's like the coconut caramel chocolate one, right?
Yeah, with the little like the toasted coconut like cookie. It's like a mini Twix.
Dank AF.
Like if you mix a Twix and a Mounds together.
He would fully fund all the staff, all the offices, but they would be there, obviously working on behalf of Biden.
Oh yeah, well yeah, but they'd also be working on behalf of anybody.
Yeah, they're mercenaries. You can just hire them.
as much as anyone, if not more than other people. And he's got good ads.
If they're working for Bloomberg, they're working for anybody.
State of the race. We got to almost the end of February and had 8 Democrats in the race. The fact that this is a fluid race
now,
shouldn't surprise us.
I'll
right?
tell you
I mean,
something
this
right
has
now.
been one of the most loaded,
wait, I want to hear it. This guy's great.
campaigns where we would have seen the field whittled down far earlier. The interesting question, I think, is we raised Bloomberg. The other interesting question is where did voters who left Amy and Pete go, which I think is a really interesting question. And then also, where is the piece of the vote that Warren is earning? Where is that coming from? Who would that go to otherwise?
This
and I
is,
think that there's a lot of questions. If we sort of
I don't know
boil this
why
down
I didn't
to,
think about this
a
before.
race in 2 lanes.
Let's just listen.
The progressive lane and the more centrist lane. Who's taking votes from where, and what are the implications on a night where we're delivering 34% of
As you were speaking,
delegates?
we're looking at numbers on the screen. Joe Biden a week ago was nowhere in the state of Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar got out. He's now leading in the state of Minnesota.
All right, put this volume down.
Was,
here's the thing. We talked about what can be the intervening event in the absence of a debate. The debate's not going to happen for a week from Sunday. The intervening event is if tomorrow, or sometime tomorrow, somewhere around where California hits, Elizabeth Warren gets out and says, "I am endorsing Bernie Sanders." Like that. Now they may have a different sense of what the best timing is for this. And by they, I mean like Warren doesn't do this unilaterally. They reach out to the Sanders campaign and they say, we're about to get out. What's the best way for us to do this to help you? And everybody makes that assessment. But the intervening event that changes the momentum, right? And it may be if you're Warren, you wait for Bloomberg. So the Bloomberg drops out and says he's behind Biden. And then Warren, you come out and you say it so that like there's nothing else. There's no other sort of like stage for Biden to take it. And the last thing that people remember going into next Tuesday is that Warren has thrown her support behind Sanders. But this is what it's coming down to. That is the intervening event that could take place. And look, we're looking at these numbers in obviously in Massachusetts. I think there's no doubt in Massachusetts, Warren, had she, announced this morning that she was endorsing Sanders, that would have made a difference. But, we need to see where we end up. Same here. When you're talking about a 5-point spread, you got to think that 60% of Warren's support is going to go to Sanders in a 2-person race. Now, again, when Bloomberg drops out, they're going to make a big deal of his endorsing Biden because he comes with all this money. But the fact of the matter is, even if Sanders says, "I don't want your money," he can spend that money. He has no voters. I think like you take away all the ads and 3 days later, I think people forget who he is. This is with like just being people like literally bathing in Michael Bloomberg ads. And so this is the potentially intervening moment. And
how likely do you think she is to do that?
I don't know. Let's ask Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, I think that's a great move for her. I think that personally, Elizabeth Warren's brand, if I'm going to reduce it to that kind of speak, would do, the best time for her personally to drop out was maybe a week ago. The second best time is tomorrow. So I think it'd be great for her brand. However, I'm just not sure who's advising her on these circumstances, on these actions. It's like, I think that, it would require, I think, a move on Elizabeth Warren's part to perhaps act unilaterally, apart from whoever's advising her that these moves that she's been making are good. They go like, it's time to drop out. So from my perspective, I think it'd be the best thing for everybody, her, Bernie, America, the Republic, to drop out. I just don't know if she is still so deeply engaged in that kind of,
I mean, yeah, look, we're going to find out. You may be right. I mean, I just think that, like, if you look at it from, and Alex, just to catch you up, you know, we were talking earlier about what could be an intervening event between now and the next debate, even though you have these elections. And the only intervening event would be Elizabeth Warren dropping out and doing a full-throated endorsement of Bernie.
Actually endorsing,
And I was making the point that it may be something you want to wait for Bloomberg to drop out, endorse Biden, then you come out and endorse Sanders, because this is the way that, like, this is just simply story structure. You know, anything that follows temporally in this narrative has more weight.
That has been the story this whole time.
And frankly, that's you know, human beings are, you know, that's.
No, I agree. I think that like what you're describing makes a great redemption narrative for the Elizabeth Warren, like the trajectory.
But
like,
forget redemption.
Redemption,
That's I mean, that's like, but think of it more.
Stories.
But think of it more as, like, from her perspective, where is she going to get the most political power?
Right.
She's not going to get it from being the second to last candidate to endorse Biden, or the last candidate to endorse Biden. I mean, I don't, you know, like, now maybe they could go to her and say, like, you could end this right now. If you come out and endorse Sanders, the primary is over, and we will remember that. But
endorse Biden.
Yeah, endorse Biden. But I don't know, like, what that really gets her that much. Hold on, Bernie is getting to the stage.
We're going to listen to Bernie Sanders right now.
Thank you, Jake. I think I called that before he did.
Kill that music, sorry.
All right, we'll play our own. They should have gone with a different song. Okay. There we go.
Different land song.
Thank you.
We're no cold turkey, a neoliberal capitalist.
You know, it's a funny thing. 31 years ago today, we won the mayoral race in Burlington, Vermont. And we won that race against all of the odds. Everybody said it couldn't be done. And when we began this race for the presidency, everybody said it couldn't be done. But tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination. And we are going to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. We are going to win. We are going to defeat Trump because we are putting together an unprecedented grassroots, multi-generational, multiracial movement. It is a movement which speaks to the working families of this country who are sick and tired of working longer hours for low wages and seeing all new income and wealth going to the top 1%. It is a movement which says the United States will have health care for all as a human right. It is a movement that says we will bring major reforms in education, making sure that all of our kids can go to college without coming out in debt. Now, what makes this movement unique is we are taking on the corporate establishment. We are taking on the greed of Wall Street, the greed of the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world, the greed of the insurance companies, and given the existential crisis of climate change, we are saying to the fossil fuel industry, their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our country and the world. But we are not only taking on the corporate establishment, we're taking on the political establishment. But we're going to win because the people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best positioned to defeat Trump.
They're obviously, they get the message, right? This is what it's about now.
You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics. What we need is a new politics that brings working class people into our political movement, which brings young people into our political movement, and which in November will create the highest voter turnout in American political history. So we're going to beat Trump because this will become a contrast in ideas. One of us in this race led the opposition to the war in Iraq. You're looking at him.
It's taking Biden's "I'm the guy who."
Another candidate voted for the war in Iraq. One of us has spent his entire life fighting against cuts in Social Security, wanting to expand Social Security.
There it is.
Another candidate has been on the floor of the Senate calling for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Veterans Programs. One of us led the opposition to disastrous trade agreements which cost us millions of good-paying jobs. And that's me. And another candidate voted for disastrous trade agreements. One of us stood up for consumers and said we will not support a disastrous bankruptcy bill. And another candidate represented the credit card companies and voted for that disastrous bill. So here we are. We have two major goals in front of us, and they are directly related. First, we must beat a president who apparently has never read the Constitution of the United States. A president who thinks we should be an autocracy, not a democracy. But second of all, we need a movement and are developing a movement of black, white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight. of people who are making it clear every day they will not tolerate the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality we are experiencing. We will not give tax breaks to billionaires when 500,000 Americans sleep out on the streets. We will not allow 49% of all new income to go to the 1% when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, I don't know what's going to happen later tonight. We're doing well in Texas right now. We won Colorado. And I'm cautiously optimistic that later in the evening, we can win the largest state in this country, the state of California. But no matter what happens, if this campaign, and I don't know what will happen, but if it comes out to be a campaign in which we have one candidate who is standing up for the working class and the middle class, we're going to win that election. And if we have another candidate who has received contributions from at least 60 billionaires, we're going to win that election.
60 billionaires is a lot.
And if there is
how many billionaires are there?
in the race,
that's the billionaire primary.
hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, we're going to tell him in America, you cannot buy elections.
Fact check, Bernie.
540 billionaires in America.
540?
Yeah.
Really not that many.
I am excited
6
about
Pinocchios
where
you
we
can
are.
buy
We have
election.
come
Yeah, exactly.
a long, long way.
That's what we call a hanging from the telephone wire.
And I want to, once again, thank the great state of Vermont and all of the people in the state. Not only for the victory you gave our movement tonight, but for the years and years of love and support you have given me and my family. So Vermont, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you all very much. Let's go on to the White House. Thank you.
All right, we have another major projection right now. Take a look at this. CNN projects that Joe Biden is the winner in Arkansas, where 31 delegates are at stake. Joe Biden will win the Democratic presidential primary in Arkansas. There are now 6 states that he has won. They are Alabama, Arkansas, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Virginia. 6 states. Biden wins Arkansas. Bernie Sanders so far tonight has won Colorado as well as Vermont, his home state of Vermont. We have several more states to go, but that's where it stands right now. 6 states for Biden, pretty good. Bernie Sanders so far has won 2, but we're still waiting for Texas. We're waiting for Utah. We're waiting for California, the biggest prize of the night.
You wouldn't know that from Sanders' speech, which was kind of like pulling a Klobuchar, coming out early, giving your campaign address, giving your stump speech, taking advantage of the prime time and the gap in the space.
I like how
right
he
now.
would have never said that about Klobuchar.
No, they absolutely would not have said that.
I would call that a Buttigieg, to be honest.
That we have called at this point, 6 for Biden and 2 for Sanders.
A southern sweep for Joe Biden, but the thing that we have to keep in mind is that Texas and California are still out. They make up almost 50% of the delegate haul tonight on Super Tuesday. And I was just texting with the top Sanders aide as we were watching the senator speak, saying that they feel really good about Texas, but more importantly, that was their goal to try to win early. I mean, it's obviously already 10:18 Eastern at this point, but compared to California, which could take a while to count because of not just the delegates, but also the narrative. They understood from the beginning that it could be what we're seeing, a good night for victories for Joe Biden, and they wanted to show that at least a very big, important state like Texas could be a win for Bernie Sanders. It's not there yet, but as we're seeing the numbers come in, it's looking good for him, and that's a really
And if you look right now at the map, right now those dark blue states, those are the states that we've projected Joe Biden, the former vice president, will win. The light blue states, including Vermont, Colorado, and then Nevada from a few weeks ago, are the ones that we have projected that Senator Sanders will win. The other important thing is, of course, since the Democrats do this proportionally, that you don't, if you win a state, it's not winner take all. You don't get all 228 delegates or whatever. They're chipped off according to what your
All right,
margin
let's
of
turn that
victory
down.
was.
We're turn up my phone for a second. We should have done this at the beginning of the night because we should have gotten Virgil Texas's predictions. Virgil, Texas, and it's Sam Cedar calling. Alex Pareene is here. Brandon Sutton, Jamie Peck, Matt Leck, Brendan.
Good evening to all of you. This is best-selling author Virgil Texas calling from a taxi cab in Tenderloin District of San Francisco.
Hi.
Right now, the traffic does not look very good. I do not have a great deal of faith in our ability to get to the East Bay at this juncture.
I'm sorry to hear about that. There are other things that I have on my mind, though, tonight. I have to say that supersede your inability to plan ahead for traffic.
Well, sure, Sam. Let's talk about your thing.
What's going on, Virgil? Well, I mean, we're obviously, Texas is extant, California is extant. These are the big prizes between the two of those states. More than half, I think, of the delegates that are up for grabs. What's happening?
I would not use the word catastrophic, but I think it's rather clear that this is a bad night for Bernie Sanders. States that looked like they were in the bag 72 hours ago are now either on a coin flip or they've been called for Joe Biden. I know the AP is called Minnesota for Joe Biden. That was a state that Bernie was very confident in. Right now in Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, third in her home state. As anyone could have told you 4 weeks ago, she would be in danger of losing her home state. She has lost it. Right now in the early count, Biden is leading in Massachusetts, which is a state what used to be that a few days ago was a two-person race between Sanders and Warren. Texas right now also on a knife's edge. It's very possible tonight that Bernie Sanders will walk away with the two biggest prizes, California and Texas, but they will not get the knockout blow that they were expecting tonight.
And
24 hours ago, some were estimating upwards of 600 plus delegates for Bernie Sanders tonight. Now it looks like Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, will be the delegate leader coming out of Super Tuesday, meaning that this race will be a delegate slog. This will be another 50-state race like it was in 2008, potentially going to a contested convention.
Yeah. Joe Biden is on stage now talking. I think we should probably, I don't know, you have any interest in hearing this?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
Okay.
Things are looking awful good.
Super Thursday went well for him.
For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
He's talking about the candidates?
Yeah.
Just a few days ago, the press and the pundits had declared the campaign dead. And then came South Carolina, and they had something to say about it. And we're told, well, when you got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy.
For the other guy?
He's about to go sicko mode.
For the folks in Virginia, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma.
Do we absorb the other candidates' powers? Is he going to go rat mode now?
I know.
And maybe even Massachusetts. It's too close to call.
We're still waiting for Texas and California, a few other small states to come in. But it's looking good. So I'm here to report we are very much alive.
Boy. Is he going to yell the entire time?
Yeah. I get the sense that they're like, you're taking a 24-hour nap, and just in
We'll
case.
send Donald Trump packing. This campaign is taking off. Join us. For those folks, listen, go to JoeBiden.com. Sign up, volunteer, contribute if you can. We need you, we want you, and there's a place for you in this campaign.
It's clear the vice president has gotten into the sarsaparilla.
I just want him to give like a, this one's for you, Corn Pop.
Turned out for us. That can deliver us to a moment where we can do extraordinary things. Look, our agenda is bold, it's progressive, it's a vision where health care is affordable and available to everybody in America. Where we bring drug prices down under control.
Oh, speaking of which, health insurance companies' stocks have just spiked in response to the Super Tuesday results.
Oh, my God.
Access to care, a bold vision.
Can't make it up.
Billions of dollars to find, and I promise you, cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes.
He came out with pie in the sky the other day, didn't he?
Yes, he's been promising to cure cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. Actually,
And leading the world to take on the existential threat of climate change. I'm going to start by rejoining an outfit I helped put together, the Paris Climate Accord, and we're going to move it a long way.
He put together the Paris.
Climate Accord.
Country where the quality of education
Before or
will
after he did
your
it?
zip code.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be triple funding for low-income school districts, providing raises for teachers, full-time school for 3, 4, and 5 years old, and increasing exponentially the prospects of their success. Free community college, providing credentials for every job of the 21st century.
He's almost talked for a full 3.5 minutes, and you're starting to get the sense he's starting to fit.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it.
Of going to college and your student debt. If you volunteer, you pay nothing.
That is so offensive to me.
We can do this. And let's get something straight. Wall Street didn't build this country. You built this country. The middle class built this country. And unions built the middle class. And the neighborhoods we come from, the three.
Protester?
Dairy.
Oh, it's another animal
God
rights.
damn it.
Yeah. Just another.
Oh, damn.
He does eat a lot of ice cream.
Well, let's see. We're going to go.
Go.
Uh-oh.
The middle class are getting clobbered. The middle class is getting clobbered. Too many people in the neighborhoods that Jill and Val and I grew up in. So they're getting hurt.
There are too
They're
many
badly
neighborhoods
hurt.
like Jill and I
Guess
grew
what?
up in.
They're the places we come from, many of you come from. It's where we were raised. The people, they're the reason why I'm running. There's the reason why I'm a Democrat in the first place. These are people who build our bridges, repair our roads, keep our water safe, who teach our kids. Look, who race into burning buildings to protect other people.
This
who
is.
grow our food, build our
They are
cars,
now
pick
having
up
him
our
just
garbage, our streets,
read the
veterans, dreamers,
teleprompter.
single moms. And
Look.
by the way, every dreamer, have hope because I'm coming and you're not going anywhere. And we're going to provide a pathway for 11 million citizens. If the other guy had voted for the well, I shouldn't get into that. I won't get going.
Yeah, I got off my script. I'm sorry. I got lost. Oh, boy. Here we go.
Plumbers, the electrical workers. These
Plumbers,
are the
electrical
people that have
workers.
been
They gave him a
forgotten.
Richard Scarry book before he went on
I
there.
agree with you, man.
They were like,
Look,
name each one of
people
these jobs.
forgot. The people I will
New
never
parent,
forget. I
Richard
will always
Scarry,
remember.
quoting
Quote,
Richard Scarry.
That's why we need an economy that rewards
Do you have that
work,
huge
not just
pop-up
wealth.
Yeah, the big one. Yeah.
Reestablishes the middle class, and this
Went
time
through
brings
that.
everybody along.
14 years, I think.
Everybody, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, whether their gender, their disability, their economic state.
Whether they have a
Democrats,
gender.
Republicans, independents,
Well, I mean,
every
everyone
stripe.
can be middle class. That's like a definitional thing.
Like like we did in South Carolina.
And by the
He's
way,
talking about abolishing class.
He's talking about a lot of things.
Look,
if everyone's the same
that's why I was
class,
so
the
proud
class
yesterday
ceases to
being
exist.
If you like
embraced
your
by
gender, you can
Amy
keep
Klobuchar. We won Minnesota because of Amy Klobuchar.
I think it's Klobuchar.
And we're doing well in
debatable.
Texas because of Beto O'Rourke.
Can't remember.
And that's why.
Can't remember what's his name.
Mayor Pete endorsement as well.
We're doing great for that guy who's everybody's like, Bo.
Someone prompted him with Pete.
Courage. And by the way, I was proud to be endorsed by Jim Clyburn. Man, he is something else. Look, our campaign reflects the diversity of this party and this nation. And that's how it should be. Because we need to bring everybody along. Everybody. We want a nominee who will beat Donald Trump. But also keep Nancy Pelosi the Speaker of the House. Win back the United States Senate. If that's what you want, join us. And if you want a nominee who's a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, a proud Democrat,
Dig at Warren.
an Obama-Biden Democrat.
Well, also Sanders.
No, yeah, I know that one.
This all starts with a revival of decency and honor and character.
Oh, yeah, come on, man.
Trump has fanned the flames of hate and sought to divide us. He's insulted, demonized, and actually just the way he talks about people. He has not a single sense of empathy.
You called someone
He
sedentary.
doesn't have any compassion.
You called undocumented workers
No regard for the
illegals
values
and
that made
bragged
this
about
country who
voting
we
for
are.
a tall-ass fence in 2006.
Not the way you were raised by your moms and dads. He looks at honesty and decency and respect, and he views it as a sign of weakness. He doesn't believe that we're the beacon to the world. He doesn't believe we're all part of something bigger than ourselves. That's why I've said from the moment I announced for this candidacy, we're literally in a battle for the soul of America.
Oh, Jesus.
Folks, winning means uniting America, not sowing seeds of division and anger and hate. We got to beat Donald Trump, and we will, but we can't become like him. We can't have a never-ending war between the parties. We need a president who can fight.
God.
But make no mistake about it, I can fight. But look, we need as badly, someone who can heal. Look, just look what we did when we passed Obamacare, or what President Obama and I did saving the American automobile industry, or what we did to pass the Violence Against Women Act.
Comes in the form of
but it's
a
not
back row.
enough. This is just a start. We need a president who can heal the country as well.
Oh, my God.
And that is what I will do as your president, I promise you.
A good friend Nelson Mandela often told me.
All men and women created. It's about
By-
delivering
you know
real
the-
results
you know
for
the
you,
thing.
your family, and the community. It's not about me, Jill, or Valerie. It's about you. It's about our families. To paraphrase the English poet Robert Browning, he said, our reach.
Well, good for him.
He's citing a quote. Yeah, he's citing his source.
Does exceed our grasp, because there's no doubt in my mind we can grasp whatever we reach for. Ladies and gentlemen, I quoted an English poet, but let me quote a real poet now. An Irish poet.
Oh.
Seamus Heaney, who wrote a poem called The Curatorian. And here's what he says, and I believe this to the bottom of my being. He said, history says,
They got some Buttigieg
don't
script
hope on this
writers.
side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhyme. We can make hope and history rhyme because of what we sing.
I don't know if I can listen to it. Virgil, I'm sorry. If you want to tune into this, maybe you can get it in the radio in the car. Or he's. It looks like he's making it through the whole the whole speach.
He's sticking to the prompter.
Sticking to the prompter, and it occurs to me that they're going to basically, let him out, once every 2 or 3 days, give a pre-digested speech, and that's their smartest strategy.
We've never lived up to.
This is some Logan Roy from Succession shit right here.
Virgil, you there?
think we might have lost.
I think we lost him.
Maybe he was overcome with emotion listening to Joe Biden.
I think it probably was too much for him to...
He forsook his devious ways and decided to volunteer for...
Driver, turn this car around. I'm going to Delaware.
He hung up, no offense to your show, he hung up to go call the volunteer.
Did he just say we're better than this moment? Get up.
Bless you and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay. I like the part where he just started listing professions just randomly.
Yeah. Projection. Here we go.
Projects that Joe Biden will win the Democratic presidential primary in Minnesota, where there are 75 delegates at stake. Biden wins Minnesota. So far, he's won tonight. Alabama, Arkansas, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Virginia. Bernie Sanders, so far tonight, he has won Colorado and Vermont.
Virgil, you there?
Vermont, once again, his home state.
Yeah, sorry about that, Sam. I was gauging whether it made sense to get out of the vehicle and go to a BART station. Right now, there seems to be some sort of merging issue. This truck is just merged.
How many miles have you traveled since last we talked? How many blocks?
Since we traveled about 1 block.
You know, they have
Some
really
of the most
good
atrocious traffic.
They have really good public transit in San Francisco.
I don't know how to use it, James. I don't know how to use it. And I don't want to look like a tourist.
Right. No, of course not.
Yeah. You don't want to be looking at the map and trying
The way that their metro system operates. I find that very embarrassing.
Yeah, no, you don't want to be in that situation. Maine is neck and neck right now with 43% in. Biden has won Minnesota. Sanders is up in Texas. I'm looking over at our board. I'm sorry, I don't mean to watch the TV when we have this great board here. Well, Utah also looking good for for Sanders, yeah. So Massachusetts.
Well, what I would
by AP.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
If I may, Sam.
Please.
What I would say is, this was the 3 days that shook the world. Everyone has been a bit shell-shocked about the very strange developments of the past few days, not just Joe Biden's landslide victory in South Carolina, a state where about a week before then, he was neck and neck in the polls with Bernie Sanders, definitely on a downward trajectory after the vice president took 4th in Iowa and 5th in New Hampshire. I think he is the Lazarine candidate right now. The Jim Clyburn endorsement certainly helped him a lot there.
Yeah.
What is unprecedented here is Pete Buttigieg, person who finished in the top 2 in Iowa and New Hampshire, dropping out before Super Tuesday. No such thing has ever happened before. And as well, the continuation of Elizabeth Warren far past her viability. I think a lot of people I know think that the fix is very much so in. What's impressive is that the vice president has been able to consolidate the support of undecided voters, Buttigieg supporters, Klobuchar supporters, in such a short period of time, when things like Bernie Sanders' Nevada landslide victory did not give him a great deal of momentum in later contests. Things like Bernie Sanders' 3 early state victories did not give him a great deal of momentum. And yes, to be fair to Pete Buttigieg, what he termed a first-place finish in Iowa also did not give him the momentum that he expected. So it's a bit strange that a figure like Joe Biden, someone who's frankly run what seemed to be a foundering campaign, has shot up on the level of 20 to 30 points in the polls just in the past 48 hours. And especially in states where a large number of the votes had already been locked in through early voting for candidates who are no longer in the race. It's a very, very strange and unprecedented circumstance. I'm sure you'll all agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not totally shocked. I mean, I guess the surprising thing is, I mean, look, if you had asked if any of us here were to comment on what Pete Buttigieg's future was 5 days ago, we would all say has none. Right? I mean, honestly, like nobody could come up with a scenario where this guy was going to go very far in the primary. They must have realized that. And Barack Obama calls him up and says, look, you may not realize it, but you have, the golden ticket. And the golden ticket is you can be the one who starts this sort of cascade by doing something that is unexpected. Go out, drop out of the race, although, they did cancel that Texas thing 2 days, like a day or two before South Carolina. So they may have realized they've seen the writing on the wall. There is no future. He doesn't have that much money. And all he had at that point was this idea that he could start this sense of momentum. And, Pete Buttigieg did not have a lot of options. He wasn't going to do anything in Indiana. No. If he was going to get anything, it's only going to be in either like a cabinet or like the DNC or something like that.
Sure. Let me pose this to you, Sam. I mean, I would guess that someone like Pete Buttigieg got offered state, someone like Amy Klobuchar got offered AG. In terms of Pete Buttigieg, I believe his campaign had run out of money, and he realized this is the most leverage I'm ever going to have.
Yep.
I also think he's someone with a specific ideological objection to Senator Sanders, and therefore did not want to have the reputation of someone who simply contributed to vote splitting on Super Tuesday in making sure that few candidates would reach the 15% viability threshold in most of the country, except for Senator Sanders. But as well, I think that's perfectly rational for Pete Buttigieg or for Amy Klobuchar. Do you think that Elizabeth Warren's behavior has been rational based on the publicly available information?
I honestly think that it could have gone either way, before Super Tuesday. If she doesn't, I mean, look, I don't have any sense of what the Sanders campaign would want in terms of timing, but if she's not on the phone with the Sanders campaign now, she should be within the next 12 hours, and they should be figuring out what's the best way for her to drop out and endorse him, because otherwise, I mean, I just don't understand why she's been doing what she's been doing for 15 years, 20 years. I mean,
well, I have 2 points. I have 2 points on that. One is that would have been rational after Nevada, after she suffered a humiliating loss of her home state. Someone who could have a distinguished career in the United States Senate now looks like a very weak political figure. Kamala Harris dropped out for even less than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
Second of all, why do you think Elizabeth Warren would be on the phone with Senator Sanders and not with Vice President Biden?
I mean, based upon just her entire career.
I mean, I wanted to ask Virgil about this because I have no idea how likely it is that she's going to do the right thing and drop out and endorse Senator Sanders, both for herself and for the country, right? Because she seems like somebody who follows the path of least resistance. And a bunch of my friends think she's much more likely to endorse nobody or something lame like our progressive values.
Right.
What do you think?
Jamie, I would say this. I think that there will be a mutiny in Elizabeth Warren's campaign if she does not drop out after what is an across-the-board loss, and where, yes, it is now, frankly, it's unequivocal that she's no longer a viable candidate for the nomination. I said she wasn't after she lost New Hampshire in a humiliating fourth-place finish in a state that abuts her home state. Now she's got a third-place finish in her home state. It is a black pill campaign at this point. Her remaining supporters are basically saying, I want to burn this whole fucker down. Regarding whether she would endorse, I do not believe she would endorse Bernie Sanders. I don't think she would anytime soon. I believe she would do what she did in 2016 and wait for the process to finish and then go with what appears to be the winning side.
I mean,
that is unless there's some kind of codicil between Biden and Warren as I think her actions here and staying in the race, suffering this humiliating third-place finish in Massachusetts, long after she was a viable candidate for the Democratic nomination, I think it is not rational unless there is information that the public is not privy to, which is to say that perhaps she is deliberately staying in the race in order to prevent Bernie Sanders from consolidating the progressive votes.
But you got to remember, though,
I think that is the most rational explanation at this point.
24 hours ago or 48 hours ago, you still had Buttigieg in the race. You still had Klobuchar in the race. The idea of there being, sort of, a bunch of people who barely make the threshold, I think was still sort of in play. I mean, I think they would have had to move very quickly after. I mean, things changed dramatically after Klobuchar dropped out. I mean, that to me was the sort of the big, even when Buttigieg dropped out, it didn't seem like it was going to change the tenor of the race that much. But when Klobuchar did, it started to create this sort of cascade thing. I mean, I think that would have been an opportunity to drop out for her. But I mean, I tend to defer to sort of lack of competence, particularly in the context of what I've seen, frankly, from the campaign. They have failed at every crucial juncture.
They absolutely have. I mean, there's absolute evidence of lack of competence, but also I have to believe that, especially because they thought they would do much better than they did.
Right. I mean, let's put it this way: who in their right mind would risk coming in third in a Democratic primary in their own state if that's what they thought was going to happen? There's no it's unclear to me that she did any benefit for Joe Biden.
So
what is she going to turn this into? That's incompetence.
Yes, but I would say where that incompetence mixed with some idea that they could still have a good result out of this came together is Pete and Klobuchar drop out. They imagine that will help them in some way. They imagine they will get some of that support, in part because all of a sudden the single largest spending third outside group in the race so far is supporting her.
Right. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the entire campaign was about, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what her value proposition is to the voters.
Yep.
And I mean, I like the idea that she has some master plan that involves Biden. It's she's lit herself on fire.
I mean, frankly, I subscribe to the incompetence argument, at least when it comes to Elizabeth Warren personally. I can't speak to anyone who's higher up on her campaign who might be giving her bad advice, because there might be a mix. There might be a mix of malicious intent from let's be Clinton staffers with nursing a grudge or in some ways trying to double deal. But her specifically, if she were actively trying to sabotage Sanders' campaign, she could do a better job at that.
Yes.
It's by tracking to the center, she's done more to to split who she's drawing from than if she had just stayed to the left the entire time.
The vast amount of damage that she has wrought is upon the Warren brand.
I do think she's damaged her own brand a lot, and I think there is a desire, not necessarily.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I don't agree with the assertion that she could do a better job of damaging Senator Sanders. She spent the past month attacking Senator Sanders. She has barely attacked Joe Biden, someone who we've been anticipating Warren attacking because they were on opposite sides of a very critical issue, the bankruptcy bill.
It's not necessarily about attacking Sanders. If her goal was just to sort of sabotage Sanders, she could make it so that there was less distinction between the two of them. It's she could have run a campaign that was more or less, that had a closer proximity to the Sanders campaign to divide his vote a little bit further. In terms of actually trying to attack Sanders, that made her do worse. It's that didn't improve her chances, and if it hurt Sanders, it hurt him to a degree that in the beginning it seemed more likely that her trying just to draw from him would have done a better job. That's not to say she didn't. That's not to say that you're not right and she didn't decide that this route would be a better way to hurt Sanders. It's just if that's the case, she's still incompetent.
I mean, honestly, that is you can see a parallel in the attorney general race in New York State when Maloney, not Maloney, the dude from upstate. He was on the Judiciary Committee. No, he's on the Judiciary Committee. He was one of the Sean Maloney. I mean, it was Sean Maloney. He got into that race to deny Zephyr Teachout a block of votes upstate, which she would have had.
Which she would have had otherwise.
And she would have probably won that AG race.
Yeah.
He got in there specifically to essentially block what Brandon is saying is that if Warren's functionality was to block Bernie Sanders, the more effective way of doing that would have been to go and actually present herself as a viable option to him, rather than distancing yourself from differentiating yourself and throwing yourself into theoretically a different lane.
Sam, I got to break in here for a second. I do have some late breaking news. I am on the bridge now from San Francisco to Oakland. I am on the bridge. Polls are going to close in 8 minutes here in California, which is looking more like a consolation prize than a firewall for Senator Sanders. I do want to leave the group with one last question before I complete this taxi ride, which is, do you believe that if Senator Warren had dropped out of the race 48 hours ago without making an endorsement, no instruction to her supporters, simply dropped out, do you think that Bernie Sanders would be doing better tonight or worse? That is the only question I want to pose. It's a yes or no.
I would say same.
Well, better. It's not yes or no.
I would say slightly better.
Possibly better.
I think he would be doing better. So, I mean,
the lack of endorsement, I think, would be bad.
Lack of endorsement would have been actually really bad.
But, I mean, to Virgil's point, I mean, to extrapolate out Virgil's point, I think that the harm she's doing is definitely real. But
yeah, I mean, I think you can point to Minnesota and Massachusetts and say, like, there's you can't do those you can't do those calculations so easily all the time. Yeah. But in those two states, I think that's bad.
I'm not concerned about her intent. I mean, if we're going to actually engage with her intent, we should. But like the real, like the actual like harm she's doing is real. It's like that's definitely the case that he would be doing better tonight if she were not in the race. But as it stands, it seems like she's going to come in like overall delegate count fourth to Pete Buttigieg, someone who's not even in the race, which speaks to me as an incredible.
Not tonight. I think that's a total.
Yes, I think that's a total. Like total delegates. She's going to be doing worse than Pete Buttigieg in total delegates after tonight, after Super Tuesday, when he wasn't even on. When he's already out of the race, and that to me speaks to irreparable damage to the possibility of her political career moving past Massachusetts.
Yeah, they have to. I mean, I mean, there is no. I think like it's the only I think question is, does she wait to drop out and endorse Bernie after Bloomberg drops out and endorses Biden? I think that's more effective. But she should be in contact with.
So you're saying she has to drop out. I mean, I said the same thing after New Hampshire. It seemed logical after Nevada. I think we're dealing with someone who is operating with a certain set of premises, a certain heuristic that is not one that you or I would operate under. And I also want to reiterate my point. I do not believe she will endorse Bernie Sanders. I think that ship has sailed. But Sam, I'm going to log off here. But once we're set up, I'm hoping we can video me in if you're going to be covering the California results.
No, I think we're going to wrap this up in about. We're going to wrap this up in about 40 minutes, so we probably won't be on when you're doing it. Although tomorrow morning, maybe I could do something if you guys are still up and doing anything.
Well, mornings don't really. Well, like I'm still drinking, possibly.
Yeah. I do have a projection for tonight. Will not make it to. You will not make it. You will not make it there.
I will say, well, you know, I am now in the East Bay area, so it's quite possible we'll be set up in 15, 20 minutes. I'm sure that Brandon will be speaking with Chris, our producer. The producers have their own, secret language that they use to discuss video-related things.
All right, if we can swing it, we'll definitely do it. Virgil, Texas, everybody. Virgil,
Hope to see it, and as well, if I don't end up back on here, you know where to find me, twitch.tv/Chapo Trap House.
Yes, there you go, folks. We will we'll throw some love that way when we wrap it up.
Sure.
All right, Virgil,
Hang in
be
there,
careful.
buddy.
Drive, ride safely. It is well now CNN saying Massachusetts is not called for Biden, but somebody else is calling it. But yeah, I think there's no doubt. I mean, I would imagine that over half of Warren's votes. I mean, in Massachusetts. But let's be honest here. When we're talking about, if presumably, right, let's say 60% of her vote goes to Biden. I mean to Sanders.
Yeah.
40% goes to Biden.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just taking a random guess. And so Bernie ekes it out in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I still think we're dealing with the same fundamental dynamic in the race.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the difference in that like 10 delegates is not going to make the difference. The narrative is what the narrative is. I think there is an argument that her endorsement in the next now, Virgil could be right. She could just be operating on a completely different sort of agenda than I project onto her.
Yeah,
Which,
I wanted to ask about the super PAC and what Virgil makes of it, what you guys make of it. This super PAC that she just got, that she can't tell us who the donors are. What's up with that?
We're going to know the donors in a few weeks, and I'm honestly extremely curious. Because they have to disclose it, but not until the end of the month.
yeah, I think it was
That'd be another reason for her to exit the race, wouldn't it? To
without a
stop that
doubt.
PAC before
Right.
the next run of
without a doubt.
states.
I
maybe?
think it's it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah, I think it's bad. I think the donors are like probably bad. I
think they're probably pretty bad.
But I say that like I think they're worse than I think they are. like I have an idea of what they are, and I'm like, okay, but like one step worse than that. But just to talk to Warren's, a lot of people are trying to understand her intentionality here, and that's not really my goal. I think that undeniably she's doing material harm to the Bernie Sanders campaign by staying in the race. However, that's her right. If she still believes she's the best candidate to become president of the United States of America, who am I to say like she should get out the race?
But that's intentionality.
That's intentionality, right? But again, however, it's just like it's the logic that would be going into that decision. I can't even replicate in my head. It's like there are so many decisions that have been made that I don't even understand how you can come to them.
But I could say the same thing about like, why would you go take a DNA test?
Yeah.
Like, why would you?
Because the pod thing.
Another.
Like, why wouldn't you? Like, why would you? Why wouldn't you just basically stay with basically when people are asking you for a finance plan for Medicare for all, why don't you just give them the finger?
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to say that like, well, a woman can't get away with that, but you know what? She should have tried.
Yeah.
Because Sanders still is to a large extent. He's not providing a detailed finance plan because you know what? Nobody provides a detailed finance plan for what they want to do. Joe Biden doesn't have a detailed finance plan for these
anything.
For anything.
Well, yeah. What's his finance plan for curing Alzheimer's, cancer, and diabetes?
Right, exactly. Like what's the like walk me through that?
Yeah. Where's the revenue coming from there?
Exactly.
What are the offsets?
Like, do we even have an idea? Like, it's quite possible to cure cancer. It's gonna never mind $30 trillion. It could be like $100 trillion. We don't know.
That comes across as just a personal flaw on her part, where she feels the need to elevate and deal with every criticism that comes her way. The DNA test thing was just like that's like trying to prove to like the school bully that you're like that you're not what you call it, a dumbass by having your doctor write a note. It's just like it's not something that you do. Like it comes down to like subpar political instincts and like just I hate to say it, she's a big ass nerd.
She's a nerd.
It's like someone says that she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like you don't have the numbers to back this up, and she goes out. She's like, I'm going to present you with the numbers. It's like that's not the game.
Exactly.
It's just like it's not the game we're playing here.
Exactly.
It's like, and if you can't adjust your personality to understand that, then you should outsource that part of yours to a better campaign staff, which she might have tried to do, and then we end up with the Clintons.
The biggest disappointment for me in terms of Warren, it was she is not good at public facing politics.
Yeah.
I mean, that has just been, it was, we've seen it in multiple sort of scenarios where they have proved this over and over again. I mean, the last version was, I tend to believe the story that there were other people who leaked that she had, retold this. I believe that, but she had 8 hours and they could have come up with a response to it. And to me, like coming out with the response of, just surely from a sort of like just a purely political perspective, you come out and you say, I never talk about something that I would have in a private conversation with other people. I just don't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to answer your question.
I'm not going to comment on this.
And then she could have gotten any benefit that come from that, and also
she could have
had her cake.
Everyone
and eat it
who
too.
wanted to believe it could have believed it, and she also could have remained above it. She could have remained above it.
in softball or baseball parlance, a grapefruit that was coming across the plate. I mean, and that to me was just sort of like, there's just an enormous amount of incompetence. And I don't think that happens in a vacuum. I think there's a certain amount of, who knows what happens when you get, that insulated in a campaign and you're that focused on a goal.
Oh, well, I think she's a perfect example of a certain personality type that probably a lot of her professional class supporters see themselves in. She's incredibly book smart. She went to all the elite institutions. She jumped through all the hoops that this class has set up for themselves as part of the so-called meritocracy. But when it comes to other kinds of intelligence, like, I don't know, street smarts, relating to people, political skills, she just doesn't have it.
I mean, people like that, people who are incredibly book smart, are also incredibly easy to roll. They're incredibly easy to con. And, they end up, generally speaking, getting in over their head by listening to the wrong people and then, being able to extricate themselves from those situations.
Well, but it's not like she didn't have a good record of working, doing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, et cetera, et cetera. But I just think, there's a specific skill set, and it's an important one when you're running to be president, and that is a sense of who you are relative to the public.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that when the early missteps led to maybe some sort of desire to pull in more professional, political-minded people, and and who do you draw from? Like the classic Democratic Party stable. I worked on the Clinton campaign. I worked on the Kaine re-election campaign in Virginia in 2018. I have this long list of. This long CV of campaigns I've worked on, successful or not so successful. And if you're a part of that class that Jamie is espousing about, that resume means a lot to you. It's like the Warren campaign seems like the kind of campaign who would hire Pete Buttigieg. who would hire Pete Buttigieg. And then you end up, I would argue, she is like a lot of her supporters. She's not only the president, she's the number one customer.
Okay. We're getting a California poll.
I don't know what early leader means.
Early leader, remember, 415 delegates are at stake in California. Bernie Sanders, the early leader. Let's check in with David Chalian right now. Tell us what we're seeing based on our exit poll information.
Yeah, we're getting a sense of how the electorate is splitting up in California.
Wow.
Take a look. The Hispanic vote, Wolf, makes up about 28% of the Democratic primary election in California. This is a Sanders strength. He's got 55% of Hispanics versus Joe Biden's 21%. That's a pretty significant margin.
I will say.
With nearly 3 in 10 voters.
Really
Take
something.
a look at young voters, 18 to 29-year-olds, also a huge part of the Sanders base. They only make up, though, about 14% of the electorate. He wins them huge, 72%. Warren gets 14%, and Biden is down at 5% with the youth vote. But again, they make up 14%. So big Sanders group, but they don't make up a ton. Look at older voters. They're twice as big a size of the electorate. 28% of the electorate in California is 65 and older. That's a Biden
Sanders
strength.
beating
37%
with 65
of
and
those
older
senior
voters
citizens are voting for Biden.
by
Sanders
8
gets
points.
18% of them.
I know we're talking about
and
very small
Bloomberg
numbers
gets
here, but
16% of them. You see how age is crucial in this Sanders-Biden fight, Wolf.
Very interesting, Jake and Dana. There's a race underway right now. Biden has done very well in the East, but Bernie Sanders is doing very well in the West, and we're saying now he's the early leader in the biggest prize of the night in California.
This is what we're going to do.
And again,
we're going to restart the stream because we now are 3 hours into it. We're going to basically do more or less a recap for the next 20, 30 minutes. It's going to play tomorrow.
Okay.
We now have a sense of at least those California numbers. I would love to see the Texas. Well, you know what? Let's
We're gonna replay this tomorrow. We're gonna stream this out live right now.
We're gonna stream it live right now, but
then
we're
put
gonna
the audio out for
we're
people
gonna do this for audio tomorrow. So, folks, come back in about 60 seconds. We're just gonna. It'll be a new YouTube. A channel, and we're going to basically just do a recap of where we are at this point in the evening. It is. I'm looking at the Maine is neck and neck. Holy cow! Look at that. With 60% in, there's literally 800 votes separating them.